Okay, Bob, thank you. We're still missing, let's see, we're missing Mick.
Mick's here.
And Inyo's not here? Okay.
Oh, great. We have control except for Bob Beaton's online.
Okay, we got everybody here.
Oh, I didn't know it was 10:03. I'm sorry.
I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I would like to note that Bob Page from San Bernardino County is on the phone. So, Bob, when you want to say something, yell at us. And when you don't need to yell at us.
And
Okay.
remember that because we have a member participating by phone, all votes need to be roll call votes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to open it up to, I would first like to, let's say the pledge. Would please join with me, and we'll salute our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for the public to address the board on items not on the agendas. No more action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone who would like to address? Please come forward.
My name is Stan Rotoro.
Let me ask you first, Stan. Bob, can you hear Stan okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Stan.
I'm sure that all of you know about the State Water Resources Control Board. They're the group that will take our valley over if we don't do our job here. I've spoken here at this podium regarding the definition of de minimis at least once and perhaps more times. It turns out that the state, through the State Water Resource Control Board, has a state definition of de minimis. And if you look at the back, this is a 2-page document, and the state's definition of de minimis is on the back. And I think it's pretty clear that their definition says that a de minimis well must use less than 2 acre-feet total of water. That is not, our definition of de minimis wells is not compatible with what the state defines as compatible. My feeling is that we are playing with fire when we do that. I think we need to reevaluate where we got our own definition and see where or why we are different, because my feeling is we are just trying to invite a lawsuit, and that's the last thing we want to do. Second item, real quick, I've also been up here before talking about the venue for the TAC and to a lesser extent the PAC. At the last TAC meeting, again, all the chairs at the Water District were full, and the parking lot was full. People had to walk some distance to get to the meeting, and in the heat. My feeling is what we need to do is encourage outreach. We need to encourage people to come to meetings, and if we don't have seating and if we don't have parking, we're defeating our purpose there. So I would ask you one more time to look at the venue for the TAC. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Keith, can you address that a little bit, the definition of de minimis, please?
Sure. The de minimis extractor is a person who extracts for domestic purposes 2 acre-feet or less per year. The definition doesn't say the well extracts. It talks about a person Therefore, we conclude that our definition is consistent with the Sigma law.
Thank you. Okay. Don?
Good morning. Don Zadiba with the Water District. Just an announcement for the board and for those that are here, a reminder that tomorrow at 9 o'clock here in City Council chambers, there will be a presentation of the hydrological conceptual model that's been developed using not only the SkyTem data that was collected in October 2016, but a vast amount of data from the basin, borehole logs, drillers' logs, TDS information, seismic lines. So pretty comprehensive model. And again, it'll be tomorrow here at 9 o'clock. Just want a reminder.
Thank you. We're all looking forward to that. Good information. Is there any other public comment?
Hello, guys. I'm here with a hat that you guys don't even know I wear probably, but for almost 30 years I've been part of the Desert Mountain Resource Conservation and Development Council, and for about the last 4 years I've been president because I missed a meeting one time. And I feel for this committee and what you go through, and I've tried to avoid this subject matter at all costs. Because as Peter said last night, it's probably a 70-hour-a-week job just to keep track of the water issues. A month, okay. But I did happen to watch a meeting about 2 months ago where Steve Johnson was explaining the budget, the initial budget. And I was dozing in and out, but I did catch a moment where you said that you were being questioned on the amount of cost to manage the grant, the Prop 1 grant. And it caught my attention. I went back to my folks at the Desert Mountain and asked them if maybe I misheard you or didn't understand what you said, and was there some way that we could possibly assist you? So you guys have a letter in front of you, and if you don't know what the Desert Mountain Resource Conservation Development Council does, is our total existence is to find, manage, and expedite grants. We've been doing that since 1998. We actually started as part of the USDA and were funded by the federal government until President Bush took our money away in 2001. Most RC&Ds went out of business at that point because we were required to self-fund. Unbelievably, we have stayed in business by our own merit and our reputation for that entire time since 2001. I've been through about 4 executive directors, 5 or 6 project managers. Melanie, get up here because you're going to leave me here by myself. Like you guys, for 16 years, I've sat on numerous boards and commissions, and the breadth of subject matter compared to the depth of knowledge you're supposed to have on every subject is just, the level of expectation is not reasonable. So I think Mr. Johnson will agree the detail, the reporting requirements, the changes in reporting requirements in any type of grant requires full-time focus. The other thing you guys need to know is that you need somebody full-time focused on looking for new grants. Every one of you has another job. And to expect you to be able to spend the amount of time you need to find grants or even know what's out there is just not, it's an unreasonable expectation, because I sat in that seat and I tried. Melanie's hourly rate is about $60. I thought Steve's was about $200, but last night I heard it gets as high as $500 an hour.
Really?
For an engineer. That's what I heard that mentioned at a city council meeting last night. But the bottom line is, we are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. If you look through this 4-page letter, there's some grants in there that are just recent grants. We're already managing a $1.8 million grant through the Department of Water Resources. We've already done the 50% advance, and Melanie will talk to the reporting requirements and the level of detail. She spends about 17 and a half hours a week just to maintain that grant. We've already invoiced them for over $880,000. Mick, you might remember a grant that we were very participated in and administered on the base, the Tui Chub grant. We managed that for 5 years.
It was a fishy deal.
Yeah, we were required to keep a track of every little Tui Chub. There's even one named after me. We also were very instrumental in the Digital 395 with 2 different grants, one from California Emergency Services Fund, and we're still involved with ESCR Broadband Connect. That's another board I serve on that I missed a meeting. My point here is we would like your folks to meet with our folks and look at where we can help you, at the same time help us. But I think we just did a general 50,000-foot analysis, but we can probably, one, take that part of the workload off of you, because I don't think that's your area of expertise. I don't think you really want to do it. It is our level of expertise. We want to do it. And the difference between, let's just use the low number, $200 an hour and $60 an hour is significant. Not to mention the fact that we will actually be out there actively looking to find more grants on your behalf. We're looking at helping you with 3 grants or 1 grant, whatever you think is best for you. But we will also commit to looking for more grants, because it's to our benefit to find you more grants, because that's the only way we stay in existence. But this is an option for you guys, and I hope you guys will give direction to, I guess, the general manager now is Ryan, to meet with our folks and see if we can come to an agreement where we can actually lower that number so this pumping fee could actually come down a little bit more, or in sooner. So that's my offer to you. And you have the letter in front of you. If you have any questions, Melanie can give you some detail on what she's already dealing with on the IRWIMP grant, which is a $1.8 million grant.
What is the time frame, Chip, on this? Are you looking for an answer immediately? Are you looking, can you give us some time to talk? Melanie, can you help with that?
Whenever time you're available to talk, we'll talk, and it's not a time strain. It's whatever, it's your grant, so.
I would like to ask staff if they could, if with the direction of the rest of the board, if they could look at that.
What took you so long? Geez, we've been talking about grants forever. Will you just wake up out of some coma?
Because I was trying to avoid you guys with every ounce of my being.
How you're funded is you operate on grants. We want money. It's a fantastic.
It sounds
idea.
like a mutually beneficial.
If you can cut our costs.
I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the room ever.
True.
But it looks like a no-brainer.
Let's go for it.
Thank you from one no-brainer to the other then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other public comment? Okay. All right. Then we will go to the consent agenda, approve minutes for the board meeting of June 21st, approve expenditures, PAC Rep 16965, Stetson 88,91233, Alan Christensen 285, the financial report, and waive further recommendations from legal counsel that has the title, waive full reading of the ordinance considered for this agenda for an introduction on the first reading and adoption on the second reading. Is there items that we would like to have pulled from the consent calendar?
Do you want a motion and then discuss, or?
However you want to do it.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay.
Do we need public comment on consent calendar, or?
Yes.
I would like to see that, yes. So you have a motion. Do we have a second?
Well, I'd rather hear public comment first.
Okay.
Well, Robert's rule says you have to second it. and then
You have to
discuss it.
second, then we can talk. Keith, how do we do this?
Motion and a second.
Right.
Open it up for discussion. You can call the
That's what we
public at that
normally
point,
do.
and then
Yes.
ask for
Okay.
discussion of the board.
Then some brilliant guy calls the question.
Okay, I will second then and yield to that procedure.
So what items, are we approving this as such, or are we pulling any of the items off the consent calendar?
We're approving it as it is, and you're opening it up for discussion.
I realize that, but I want to make sure that we have the time for the board to comment and the time for staff and public. So I want,
Well,
I'm
actually,
going back
Madam Mayor,
to
the-
public.
you got a guy up here that he needs to say something godlike.
So, Madam Mayor, remember that the normal procedure for the consent calendar is you either accept it to be voted in on one motion, or any member of the board can
That's what I'm
pull an
asking.
item for discussion
That's
separately.
why I was asking for the pulling. Does anybody want an item pulled? I would like to pull item D.
You would,
Yes, surprise.
yeah?
So let's go ahead and then approve the consent agenda,
Well-
items A, B, and C, pull item D.
There's
And
one other
we'll-
complication, and that is that the public needs to have the ability to comment on any action before you take action. So
I'm gonna do that.
By tradition, we've asked members of the public if they want to pull anything for
Okay, I
discussion.
was going to do it, all right. I was doing it like we do it at the city. Okay. Tell me, public, does anybody else want any items pulled? Okay. Now, can we approve item A, B, and C? And we are pulling D to discuss further.
Has that motion already been made? If not, I'll make that motion.
Sure, go ahead.
I made it.
I second you're making it.
Okay. All right, so let's approve items A, B, and C. All in favor?
It has to be a roll call vote because we've got
That's
some.
right. Okay, roll call, Bob.
Director Kingsley.
Aye.
Director Gleason.
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Now, we have approved items A, B, and C. Let's go to D. I would like to discuss that. I'd like to hear from the public, and I would also like to hear from the board and staff. Who wants to take that first? Board, or you want to wait for public comment? All right, let's bring public comment up. Public comment on the waive further reading and the discussion thereof. Is there any public comment? No public comment? Wow.
Is this for all things? You could wait for the reading.
Okay. Judy.
Yes, Judy Decker. I have some comments. My comments are, I congratulate you, first of all, for finally writing a more professional fact sheet. It seems as though you folks are doing your homework as you go. I'm not just talking about the board, I'm talking about the staff as well. Today we have another complication that showed up. Some other organization that can manage grants for a fee. I know you need the money, or you think you need the money. You have been told by the public and your own board members many times you need a finance committee. You certainly do need a finance committee. I think you need to look more carefully at what you're doing, how you're doing it, what the options are before you vote on this again. But the decision is up to you. I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the things I've read in emails to myself and heard from other people about this organization. They don't think it's real. They think you aren't doing it right. Some have even gone so far as to say you're going to cheat them out of their money. I've heard from people that they are going to deliberately email other well owners and tell them not to register their wells. You have a huge public relations problem at this point. Part of it is, I believe, a lack of unification of the 5 agencies. I didn't say people, I said agencies. Because you are bringing 5 agencies with their own methods of governing to create this agency. And none of you want to lose out. I hope you take my comments and think about them carefully, because they're offered sincerely. And I know that just as a member of the public and a well owner and a member of the city, that I hear things from people that I don't think you hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Is there any other public comment on this item? All right, staff and board?
I've got a comment.
Okay.
I think that this agenda item was a mistake, that it's covered by Section 5. I think this was an attempt to put a separate motion down to waive adopting the ordinance by reading in full and to adopt it by title only. But you can have that motion later at 5. It's not necessary to do it as part of the consent calendar.
So what was the purpose of this item then?
I think it's a miscommunication between me and the associate who covered for me while I was gone.
Oh, blame it on the other guy.
Okay.
Well, I said it was a miscommunication. It takes two.
So what is your recommendation?
That we just move
ignore
forward.
this item?
It's not necessary. We'll handle it as part of 5.
All right. Thank you, Judy, for your comments. All right, we are then going to go to 4, the Water Resource Manager's Report.
Thank you, Chairwoman. First of all, I got a couple things to start with. If I have trouble talking today, I've always got something weird going on, but my sinuses are going pretty crazy right now. So I don't think I have a cold, but my sinuses are going crazy. I might have to stop. So I'll get that out of the way. The other thing I wanted to get out of the way is, well, I'm not saying I'm not worth $500 an hour. I'm not charging $500 an hour, just so you know. Nothing close. I think they're reading off of our rate sheet, which is typical for professionals, is that there is a multiplier rate when you're doing direct testimony in court as an expert witness. So that would be a rate, something like that. It's not even $500, but it would be something like that. The other part of that is just for clarification also. Grant help, yes. I've already talked to Ron. We're gonna set something up to get some grant help, because absolutely correct. There are certain technical aspects that need to go into the grant administration of that grant, and we can provide that. But there's a lot of administrative work that we certainly would love to have somebody else do. And I don't do it. You guys have met Heather Steele. I had Heather here before. Heather's the one that does that. Her rate's about half of mine. So we try to use an appropriate rate for the level of work that we're doing. So those are clarifications. The other thing I wanted to say before we got the Water Resource Manager report is just a comment on the informational meeting that was held back on the 12th, I think it was. Was it July 12th? Because I attended the meeting. We had a huge turnout. I see a lot of people that we regularly see here that were there. A lot of people that we see here that were at the meeting that we don't normally see. But there was a good turnout, and I thought at least it was helpful. It was helpful for me to hear from you folks, both during the meeting and after the meeting.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It was the 10th, if that makes a difference.
10th, okay. Yeah. July 10th, I'm sorry, for the minutes and stuff, yeah. On the 10th, I just wanted to say I was very, very impressed. I said it at the meeting. I was very, very impressed with the turnout and the level of questions and the level of interest, and I thought it was productive. I hope things are moving forward. I think the message I wanted to give there, and the only message I have that I'm trying to do here is that, you know, if there's a problem, and we think there is a problem with the water levels going down, we got to work on it together. We all got to work on it together and find a way to solve it one way or another, and we're going to work our way through that, and we're going to try very, very hard to be transparent the whole way on the solutions that are brought before all of you folks. So that was the primary message. Now, Water Resources Manager report, we can go. I've got Jeff Helsley here, the poem. He's going to walk through the poem real quick. It should go pretty fast. Commander Longbottom's not here, and he's not on the phone, so I think it should go pretty fast. So,
does he have a copy of it?
Yeah, he does have a copy. So he's going to walk through it. We've tried to do a couple things. We've got a very, very detailed poem that we're using, and that's fine. We've worked our way through it, and we're using a very detailed poem. We also have a simplified one that we try to bring to these meetings that kind of just shows generally where we're at and where we're going. I hope that's working for everybody, but Jeff's going to present. This is Jeff Helsley from my office.
Good morning, everyone. If we could have the poem up. Oh, he's telling me I need to click. That was my fault. Thank you. Okay. All these things are in blue. They're not on critical path. These are the detailed actions we have to take. I want to go to the critical path items, which are these, and that whole series of red lines is the groundwater modeling that's going on. We've talked about it before here and at the TAC that we had a little hiccup in getting DRI contracted to make the changes to the model that were needed and do the historical calibration. You know, that's behind us. They're working on it, and that's the top red line right there, which is one of the critical things that need to get done. And then there's some subsequent items that have to do with the modeling under that. There was a ad hoc TAC committee meeting last month to look at what we want to use for historical baseline, recharge in the basin, and pumping. And there'll be feedback from the modelers on that. And they will then go forward and work on the calibration once they've made the changes and bring that back to the TAC 2. And then we'll start looking at what actions we want to model. So that's the series of critical items there on the TAC, on the POAM. There we go. Oh, that's where I want to be. And then in the middle here, the red lines are the work that we're doing on looking at alternatives for bringing in imported water into the basin. We had a presentation to the TAC. We've narrowed down to basically 2 options that we're looking at this time that seem most viable that we'll be bringing more information forward on. Those are really the critical things that are going on right now. These other critical items are, when we get to it, are actually writing the chapters become critical as we get towards the end of it, and the reviews become critical. That was all I wanted to present at this time.
Jeff, I just have a quick question. This is for the audience and stuff. Can you point out to the audience where, at what time in our poem, the schedule, we will be actually distributing drafts of the GSP when we first start doing? I know that we have an introductory section coming up pretty quickly, but then we're going to get into more of the meat of the GSP, when those are actually going to start coming out, and they will go through the TAC, but they will go out to the stakeholders too.
Yeah, we're going to start, we've been making presentations to the TAC, and then the next thing we're going to do is we've had several presentations on potential recycled water projects in the basin. And we're actually putting out a technical memo tomorrow for the TAC's review. So that's sort of the first major, it's not a chapter of the report, but it's the first major written document that will support our GSP that we are producing. So that starts tomorrow, and that information will then, once it's been reviewed by the TAC and we address comments, that information will end up in the GSP. As you mentioned, the introductory chapter here will be coming up in probably 6 to 8 weeks. We'll have the introductory chapter for the GSP. And then we need to do a lot of this modeling and talk about sustainability criteria, so the chapters will start. The other chapters will come out a little later.
I probably should have prepped you on that question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They basically start coming out. It'll probably be the middle of next year, because we need to go through quite a bit with the TAC and the PAC. So around, I think, the meatier chapters come out May or June of next year.
Okay. But, for example, you're we're putting a tech memo together on the recycled water work. We've already given 3, I think, presentations at the TAC on alternative water conservation. So we would expect to have a tech memo produced for that would go through the TAC also. So pieces of the sections of the GSP will be going through the TAC before then. But you're talking about middle of next year, with actual sections of the GSP that include all of the technical memos and the comments will be accumulated into a section for the GSP.
The form of the final form of the sustainability plan is about the middle of next year, but the components of it will be starting tomorrow. Those will be going out and through the rest of the year.
Okay.
Steve, and Jeff, I'd like to ask a question too, and I know Peter has one. There was discussion that the TAC is requesting more additional information so they can make comments and begin some of the work and then share that work with the PAC. How soon, at the TAC meeting, there was, I think I remember 3 or 4 presentations. Yes. Are they making comments back to you on what you presented to them at the TAC meeting?
Yes. Every presentation we make, we ask for comments, and typically, we ask for comments within the next 10 days to 2 weeks. We get those comments, and we take those comments forward for the next presentation or the next step that we do, along with the work we do moving forward. So yes, every presentation that we make at the TAC, we request comments, and typically we do get comments from the TAC members.
And how are they contributed to the poem, or how are they implemented in? I guess I'm asking because I've heard the TAC say numerous times they feel like they're not getting enough work. I assume now that you've given them all the work and they're beginning that or are continuing that. Is that a wrong assumption?
They definitely, we give them work, and at this last meeting, there was a workshop on the modeling work, and we had there's an ad hoc group that's working on that. There was a presentation made, so comments will be coming back from the rest of the TAC members on that. 2 other presentations, one on recycled water, alternative water. We get comments back on that. As Jeff mentioned, a technical memo on the recycled water will be out tomorrow. We promised it by the end of this week. That's tomorrow, so we got to get it out to them tomorrow. We're asking for comments back on that so we can address those at the next TAC meeting. Okay. The other thing we were asked to do, which I mentioned at the TAC meeting, this is for the audience to know too, I mentioned at the TAC meeting that we've talked about it internally probably 2 months ago. I just haven't gotten it back from my folks to look at. But it came up at the TAC again, and I thought it was a good idea. We talked about it, said, yes, we're going to do it, and we'll get it to you. And that is an outline, sort of a detailed bullet point outline of the final GSP in a first draft form. So we are looking down the road at what this GSP is going to look like, what the bullet points, what it's going to include. It's not going to include the answers to the issues that need to be addressed, but the intent is at least as a first draft to identify the issues that will be addressed as part of the GSP that will go through the TAC and the PAC and of course the board before it goes into GSP. But they were asking for us just a look forward as to what we think that GSP is going to look like in outline form, and we confirmed that we could committed to provide that by early next week and get that distributed to the group too. So there should be plenty of work to do, yes.
That will go to the TAC, and after the TAC has come back to you, does it then go to the PAC?
If there's an appropriate item to go to the PAC, yes. We have linked the PAC with the TAC. If there are policy issues with anything that we are doing, okay. we give it serious consideration, whether it's a policy issue or a technical issue. But if it's a policy issue, yes, we want to take it right to the PAC. And that's what I've communicated that with Donna. That was the suggestion from Donna, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Peter also has a question. You're going to follow up? Go ahead.
Follow up to that. Adam, could you please give us your opinion of what the Water Resource Manager said, what you agree and where you disagree, or if you disagree with anything?
I agree with him. The reason that is that anytime there are discussions that are needed, comments, any of the information that he sends out via email, plus the ones that come to our meetings, we also have a discussion at the meeting. And then if we have any additional comments, we send those via email to him as well. There is There is, when they also send stuff to me, they may send them to me and I turn around and send them directly to Steve, the Water Resource Manager, so that he has everything that is sent to me. And I also let everybody in the TAC know at this portion, if you have questions, they can also go directly to Steve and his group, so that that's added to what we think needs to be discussed, needs to be answered, so that all of the technical side is met.
So we have issues with the TAC in terms of workload, and they're eager to do more stuff. But in terms of the relationship and how the function is working between the Water Resource Manager and the TAC leadership, you're okay with the way things are going?
I am okay with how they communicate back and forth. If there is an issue that one member of the TAC has a concern about or a question on an item, they don't need to respond to everybody involved. It always gets sent back to them. And so I am of the thought that because I don't hear any other or see any other emails or any other conversations with TAC members, those things are being met properly.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Peter.
And lots of more ad hoc coming. Sorry to say that back, which we are excited about that.
Okay. Peter?
Almost forgot what I was going to say, but then I remembered. So this, the initial introductory chapter, whatever, one thing that I've been asking I tried to ask it last time, but we went into sudden death overtime. In that initial introduction, are you going to have like an outline of how the plan's going to look? Like, I use the word straw man, and then you kind of fill it in, like a table of contents? Because I was kind of curious of the flight path, and then where we're going to end up. Because, I guess metaphorically, I was thinking like we're trying to build a car and we're putting together pieces, but what does the car look like at the end of the assembly line? So that's kind of what I was thinking about in the terms of a straw man or whatever correct term. Somebody can correct me, but so will that be in there delineated, and then you start filling in those chunks?
Yeah, actually, I mentioned that a little bit a minute ago that we had talked about it before. It came up at the TAC. We totally agree. We will be putting together what I would consider a detailed outline of the GSP, which is the work product,
right.
Early next week. It's a first draft,
right.
And the idea is to get people get it. But it's going to be a working document. It'll likely change several times.
It should be.
But for right now, my goal is to put, it's effectively, people use different terms. People use, it's a brain dump. Right now, it's a brain dump on all the things we think will be in the GSP. It may be in it, may not. We may find other things, but it's a brain dump on what we think this is going to look like when we get done.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted, because
Exactly.
I wanted to see what we're going to build.
Yes, and we'll have that out early next week for everybody.
Fantastic.
Probably go through our team and the board, and then up to the TAC.
The one of the reasons is it just makes sense to me. The other one is people are saying, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Well, we're collecting a lot of information and doing a lot of reports and talking forever." But if you can see that brain dump, where this is now a product being created, and then there's a car at the end or whatever you want to call it, that would be perfect. And that's exactly you answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions for
Yes.
this particular item? Is there any question?
Bob said yes.
Bob,
Yes, please.
do you have questions?
I wanted to see if Steve to provide an example of talking about to help the public understand. What I'm thinking of, and going down the wrong path,
Hey,
you mentioned having a...
I can't understand you.
You're cutting out like every other word.
Can you speak slowly? Maybe that's it?
I can try.
I got that. I can try.
I wanted to ask Steve if his mention of a tech memo coming out,
Not helping.
is it still cutting out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you call back and maybe get a better connection? Would that work? No.
Staff back there, what is the options we have that you are the gurus? I see him coming.
I'd do that.
Bob, what it sounds like to me is it may be a function of an auto mute feature that's clipping sort of the beginning and the ending of what you're saying. If you're on a speakerphone, it might be good to pick up the receiver maybe.
Yeah, I'm on a Polycom.
Okay, so is there something we can do, or can we have you continue?
How about you text us?
No. Bob, let's try it again. Take your mute off and let's see if we can just talk through the phone.
Yeah, I apologize. So I heard Steve mention a tech memo coming out tomorrow. And so what I'm wondering is if it would proceed as follows: that the TAC would provide comments on the tech memo, and say there's two tech recycled water, and then sometime in the future there's on imported water. Would it be the process that once the TAC census on the two tech memos regarding imported water and recycled water, that then the PAC could be asked to provide policy direction regarding how might ask for ramp on their production on the technical two studies.
Let's see if we can rephrase what you said. Steve, can you?
Yeah, I think I can. I think what Bob is asking is that as we work through our tech memos like this, if it won't be the procedure for everything, but right now, as we work through a tech memo, and we work through the tech, get their comments back, and we get it to a fairly final form of a technical memorandum. And he mentioned recycled water, but I think an imported water, because we're looking at imported alternative water conservation, that as we work through those, will we be looking at those work products to then go to the PAC and have the PAC comment on the policy side of that? The answer is yes. We already, and it should show on the poem, our thinking going forward. We look forward on some of these items, and it should show on the poem that as we do things, certain things happen through the TAC, they do link right to the PAC and go to the PAC for policy issues. But so the answer to Bob is yes, and we'll be looking for input in case we miss anything to make sure that if there are policy issues on things that are being discussed at the TAC, they do get in front of the PAC and give the PAC an opportunity to comment. So I think that's what he's asking. Is there going to be a link? And yes, there is.
Bob, is that what you asked, and did you get your answer?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to be able to show the public that this is kind of how it would proceed at what point if asking policy questions.
Okay. All right. Was there any other questions or comments for Steve? Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the initial draft coming out. And I appreciate really what Mr. Brown talked about. The way I heard Mr. Brown say is, I know we're building a great car. We just don't know if it's a van or a sports car. And so I'm thinking in my mind and saying, okay, I think that's a valuable comment because I think the public deserves to understand our fundamental strategic objectives. What is the grand strategy to which all else flows into? So I think at the very beginning of the release of this GSP, this draft GSP, it has to clearly articulate, not only Sigma compliance with Sigma, but what are the values that we as a board are putting into that GSP. We want to ensure economic growth. We want to ensure compliance. We want to ensure some fundamental values. It only take a paragraph or two, but I think it has to outline that. So we need that first and foremost in the GSP, so people understand the big picture of what we're trying to achieve. And I think those were good comments, Pete. Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Nick?
Okay, I have one more. How close are we to following our timeline? Is there anything we're significantly behind or anything that we're behind on? I can see it there, but I know most of them can't read it.
Well, I guess, go ahead, Jeff. Critical path. What does it look like?
Our schedule did change a little bit with due to the delay in contracting with DRI on the modeling. So far, everything else is on schedule, and that's why all those modeling tasks popped up on the critical path, is that it had slipped a little bit. So we need to keep on that schedule it's on to get to the end point.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
Yes, on schedule. Right now, yes.
All right. Continue, please, sir.
I think that's it on the poem, unless anybody else has any other questions. I'll go to the next item.
I can pretend that I'm long bottom and grill you on the microscopic detail of it, but yeah. I don't have that brain power.
Okay, was there any comment from the public on this part of the report? Okay.
Okay, I'll proceed. This is proceed to item B, report on submittal of Proposition 1 grant application status. Oh, sorry, we have one. Sorry, I wasn't looking up.
Yes, Raymond Kelso, and I'm looking at this chart up here, and it's an eye chart, and I don't think anybody in this audience can read that. But what's important here is the critical path, as Mick said. And the other thing is an executive summary. You don't need all that. We can't read that. And what does this have to do with mitigating the overdraft? Let's stay on track here, gang. You just need one page, critical path, some bullets about how you are achieving mitigating the overdraft. Okay? Nice and simple. Thank you.
All this is available online. And are there any? You're holding them up,
It's
and
up
there's
front.
some out front,
Yeah.
if you'd like to read them.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Raymond. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to item B, which is a report on the Prop 1 grant application. Just a couple things to report. DWR did send the grant agreement, the draft grant agreement back to us with some minor changes. They weren't significant. We're not allowed to comment on them anyway, so we've got to go with what they provided. But the changes were not significant, so we're good with the actual agreement. The thing they did ask to do is ask to reformat all three of the exhibits that were provided with the grant application, Exhibit A, B, and C, which provide all the detail, the work plan, and the budgets and all of that. They asked to reformat all that and then resubmit it. So we are working on that now. They gave us till the end of July to get that grant application agreement back to them with the new exhibits. I had mentioned at the informational meeting that my goal was to try to get it so I could report today that it's ready to go. It's not quite ready to go. Next couple of days it will be. It will definitely be done by the end of the month. I'm hoping to get it done in the next couple of days. Jeff's working on it. Heather is working. She's not here today, but she's working on it. But we want to get it. The goal here, folks, and I mentioned this at the informational meeting, our goal, and believe me, we're trying as hard as we can to get it there, our goal is to get this agreement back into the DWR's hands so that they can approve it the soonest and get it executed as soonest rather than later. So every time they give us something that needs to be done, our goal is to get it back to them as soon as we can. I like to keep it in their hands, not in ours, whether we're waiting for them, not for us. So we are trying to get it completed. We will get it back to them well within the time limit that needs to be turned back in to the state. We have confirmed, because having done this before, process is always a big issue. And one of my concerns was we get this thing all done and we send it back to the state, and then there's some kind of process issues with the state. We have confirmed with the state that the applications as it's prepared with the revised exhibits, and by the way, we are running the revised exhibits by the staff ahead of time, so there shouldn't be any issues when we submit the revised exhibits that they don't meet with the staff's requirements. So we are working with the staff ahead of time, so it should be a clean submittal, but there's always a concern about just about processing a grant agreement. We have confirmed that the board has authorized the general manager to sign the agreement. We, just in case we didn't have to come back and find Peggy to get the signature or find legal counsel to get the signature, it's confirmed that the commitment has been made by the board. So the general manager is authorized to sign that agreement. So as soon as we have it ready, all we have to do is process it through Ron and send it up, and it should be executed hopefully pretty quickly by the state. The last thing I want to report, and this is sort of a correction, it's in the TAC report today as a correction. It's a correction of what I reported at the TAC meeting. And it has to do with the 50% matching funding requirement of the Category 2, which is our $1.5 million. As you recall, when we prepared the grant application originally, we had the Category 1, which is disadvantaged communities. That was 100% grant. There was no matching fund requirement. With Category 2, which is our GSP, there was a 50% match required by the local agencies for the amount of money that we're going to get from the state. A lot of work was done to document in-kind services, a lot done from the Navy to document in-kind services for those matching funds. It was part of the requirement for submitting the application to make sure that we had enough in-kind services and local funding to match the full amount of $1.5 million grant. So a lot of work was done up front to do that. There was also a provision in that initial grant application that we could apply for a waiver of that 50% match for Category 2, 50% match on the $1.5 million. We made that application. It came up in front of the board at one point asking whether we did or we didn't. We reported that we did make that application. The morning of the TAC meeting, we got word, and I got word from my staff, and it got a little mixed up in what actually happened. But what actually happened was DWR looked at the request for a waiver on the 50% match on Category 2. That's a 50% match on the $1.5 million for matching funds locally, and they approved the waiver. So they have approved a waiver of the in-kind services and the match on the Category 2. The limit to the grant doesn't change. We're only going to get $1.5 million, so that doesn't matter. But what it really does help us, and this helps a lot with all grant applications, this helps a lot, is that with every application we would make to the state, we would have to document an invoice and document the in-kind services with every invoice so that we can demonstrate that we have in-kind services or local money to match any money that we're asking for from them. That would have had to be part of every application that we make or invoice and progress reports. In addition to that, the state would have to go through and verify all that. They would have to verify everything to make sure that we are match funding everything that they match. With this waiver that they just approved, the reason why it's important is the processing of all of the grant application documentation going forward should be a lot simpler. And we don't have to go through all that detail or keep all that documentation. So certainly costs should go down on trying to administrate that grant. So I want to make that correction because I didn't quite report that correctly at the TAC meeting, but the fact is they have waived the 50% match requirement for Category 2, which is good. It was a good thing.
They waived all the matching funds?
All the matching funds, there's no match required. It's huge, yeah.
Okay, so how does that change our need for the dollars?
It doesn't change the need. Everything's
that.
okay. That's a good question. It doesn't change anything. All this is, it changes this document. It doesn't change anything on what we're going to do or what it's going to cost to do it. All it changes is the actual administrative cost to work with the state to actually apply for funds and get funds back is simplified tremendously. So that's what it really changed.
There was a
After you go ahead.
There was a question whether there was going to be any significant changes or any changes at all to Prop 1. Would you please address that? Because that was brought up at City Council last night. Could you please address that?
Sure. No. The Prop 1 application has a very detailed scope of work and budget. And the scope and work and budget that is in the Prop 1 application is entirely consistent with what you're working on for your pump fee, staff report, and all the information you have for your ordinance. They're consistent. They were prepared by the same people, the same format. So yes, they are all consistent.
Okay.
I'll make one other comment. When I say that it'll reduce administrative costs going forward, the other thing that it could do, right now we are we're reasonably confident that we have enough matching funds or in-kind services to get the full $1.5 million. But we don't know that till we actually do the work. Okay? What getting this waiver does is eliminate that requirement. That means we get the 1.5 regardless of whether we create matching funds or have in-kind services or they're approved or not because there's no requirement. So bottom line is it assures us of the full 1.5 million as part of our of the cost of this project. Yeah.
Thank you. Peter?
Just to clarify, is that the same as like when you're applying for a grant and it's a 50-50 grant? And that's like, is that called the cost share where you match 50-50?
Correct.
Okay, so then we don't really need to do anything more with cost sharing adjustments or going back to see if we can get some kind of a variation on that because I think the brackish water guys got a better cost share ratio. I don't know what it is, but it was less than 50-50.
Yeah.
So I was just making sure that we looked at that particular wrinkle because obviously if we don't need to have that money, awesome.
Yeah.
So that makes it's kind of like the same thing or better, really.
Yep, it is.
Okay.
It's better. And there are provisions in both grants to apply for up to 50% upfront funding so they can front load some money. We're planning on making that application, but we obviously can't do that until we execute an agreement. So we're waiting to get the agreement executed.
So potentially we could get front-loaded grant.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's on your heading as soon as you get the actual document.
Correct.
That makes me feel better, even better.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please, sir.
Okay, moving on. The next item that I have is the item C is discussion approval of draft well registration report and the reporting forms and the draft fact. We have copies of them here. I think Rika had created a lot of copies for the information meeting, so we brought more copies here. They haven't changed since then. We've had comments come in on the registration form that it's too complicated for certain types of applications. We've tried to make it as general as we can. I will say this, as we talked about at the informational meeting, the whole goal here is to try to work together to get this information so that we can try to get a handle on what's happening with the water in and the water out of this basin. I mean, that's the whole goal. The registration forms, depending on what happens today, the registration forms are planned to go out early next week, depending on what happens today with the rest of the agenda items. There's areas on the informational form where you can call to get help. I think either Ron or my number or both is on their emails to get help if you have trouble with that form. I think we're going to add a couple of items. One of the things we're going to add at the top, because the question came up, I think Chairwoman Breeden had mentioned it, that some people don't know what to do if there's something we ask and they don't know. I think we're going to put something on it before it goes out that says, if you don't know, just leave it blank or say, I don't know, we don't care. The idea is just to start the level of communication and start communicating, back and forth with you folks. So we will be getting the registration forms out next week. As I mentioned before, when the registration forms do come back, we're going to take the report forms, which is very long right now. We're going to take the report forms and we're going to custom fit the report forms based upon what we learned from the registration form. So you won't be seeing things on the report form. Hopefully, this is the goal. You won't be seeing things on your report form that don't apply to your type of operation or what you're doing with your well. It'll be specifically tailored toward your well. So that's what's happening going forward. I don't think any action or any approval needs to be made of these forms. They've been out. Everybody's seen them. We've gotten lots of comments. We made lots of changes. And we're still open to other changes. So if you have something that you don't like that's in there or you want to change something, you can certainly let us know and we'll work with that. The FAQ is all three of the documents are online. The FAQ has been modified several times. I think Judy reported that it's in a pretty good form now. I think it's pretty good for providing information. So if anybody has any other questions that are besides that, again, ask us, let us know, we'll be happy to answer. So.
Please come up if you're going to make a comment.
Thank you for your report, Steve. However, you say you're going to send out registration forms. Who are you going to send them to? The cards that went out for the informational meeting, I believe you said, or Mr. Strand or Mr. Lemieux said that 400 some odd cards went out. Yet, earlier in the documentation, you mentioned that there are 1,800 private wells. Members of this public have requested that you send notifications to the APN numbers. As an example, we did not get notification of either meeting, yet the one time you had a list of all the APN numbers that you thought were well owners, our name was down there. If there are 1,800 private wells, whether they're single wells, mutual wells, co-ops, ag wells, or whatever, they all need to be notified. And this is what I was talking about earlier. That your key here is communication, not with the people that come here, not with the people that read both newspapers or have a computer and go online, is with every single property owner in this valley. Because without water, we just might as well forget it and go away. So it is critical in my view, and I guess I'm not the only one because I've heard this from other people, that you spend the money, even if you don't have it, you spend the money and send notification to all these property owners. I think it's imperative that you do that. It's imperative that you get them on your side. And it's imperative that you know who they are.
Judy, one of the things we said we were going to do is send out notifications to the 93555 and 93527 zip codes.
Well, I don't know what Pearsonville's is.
Well,
All right, well,
But it,
Matt, sorry, we're not going to ignore you.
There are property owners, for instance, Meadowbrook Dairy. They do not live here. I have no idea if they have a P.O. box here or not. They do not live here. Mr. Steffwater does not live here, yet he owns thousands of acres. He needs to be notified too.
Thank you, Judy.
My question
Please
is-
identify yourself for the
Renee
record.
West Lusk. I live within Ridgecrest city limits. My questions are, you said you're going to send these notices out, but are they going to go directly to each well owner? And the other thing, are you going to have an alternative place for them to pick up applications if they don't receive one in the mail? Is there any other way you can contact all the well owners? Because I keep hearing reports constantly that there's people that do not get any notifications about the IWV GA and the well information. They're not on the list that was originally sent out.
Is there a way that we can ask those people who did not receive something, because obviously you're hearing it. If you're hearing it, can you encourage them to let us know who they are? Because I know I'm being facetious when I say that, but it is also true. Short of knocking on every door in the valley, there is no other way to know what you don't know. So if you know of something, of somebody, ask them to please let us know.
And if I might, Chairwoman Breeden, we are sending notices out to everyone that we have on the list, well owners' names, everyone we have on the list that are considered non-de minimis. It was decided that we would not register de minimis wells, so that's the goal right now, is to get as many of the non-de minimis as at the information that we've got. That is what's going out, and it is the forms are also online. I imagine that we could have them at the city or at the water district, have forms. I know they're at the city. I know Rika has copies of them too here at the city, because there's a set of copies here too. But the next step would involve working with the de minimis folks.
Sir?
Good morning. Michael Davis, Gresham Savage, Nolan and Tilden for Meadowbrook. In looking at the forms, I have to assume that the two are going to be used in conjunction. So the well registration form essentially provides the information for the reporting form, the individuals from whom you're going to seek reporting information. The registration form isn't really complete, calls for registration by August 20th prior to the form being finalized. Mr. Johnson indicated he doesn't think there's a need for approval, but it's agendized for approval, so we're assuming that it's going to be considered for approval by the board. But the second half of that is the reporting form. And I would direct the board's attention to page 2 of that form. You'll note that there are a number of items that are to be yet determined, so the form's not complete. A person who's asked to complete that form has no idea what the coefficients are that are going to be used for calculating the information. We don't know where the reporting forms are going to be kept, what purposes they're going to be used for. Like I said, we're assuming that they're going to be used in conjunction with the reporting form. But I don't see how you can proceed with the reporting form when the information is complete. And some of the things that are missing are significant. In other words, what the per acre foot assumed or actual figure that's going to be used is can make a lot of difference. So I would encourage the board to complete these before it proceeds to adopt. We have spoken before about our belief that all the wells need to be registered. Partial registration doesn't provide Mr. Johnson and his team with the information that it needs to complete its preparation of the data back to this board, and an incomplete data package isn't productive, and it fits within what Judy Decker is saying about getting this public relations issue under control and getting the people in this valley on the board side.
That's it. Thank you, sir. Steve, would you address that?
Yeah. First of all, that's correct. We do intend to use them together. The intent for the report form was to give folks an idea of what we're going to be looking for actually reporting groundwater extractions or production. That was the intent, to say this is the kind of information we're going to be looking for. We've created a form that was very broad for many different applications because we recognize things like some folks may not know how deep the water is at their particular well site. We've left that blank and indicated to be determined. Some of the work that we need to do between now and the report forms going out is that we are also looking at the groundwater levels throughout the basin for monitoring wells and groundwater contour maps, and that's part of the customization that we're going to do for each one of the forms. If we don't get information back on a registration form, we'll provide that information to say this is what our information shows. So the intent is that we will customize the report form based upon the registration form, in addition to some other work that we are still doing to make that report final, but it will be done in order to make individual customized report forms final, not as a whole. So the report form is in conjunction, but it is just a general guideline of the type of information that will go into your actual report form that goes out, if that's helpful.
I'd like to ask a question, and can you tell me how the wells are categorized? When someone goes to register, and Mick, maybe you can help with this too, because I know it goes to the county. When one goes to drill a well, they are required, because it's a ministerial duty, they are required to do these things. Can you address, and Mick, can you help, whether it is a single residence well only used for one person, it is a well that is used for 4 or less, or a well that's used for 15 or more? How does that go about? Can you talk about that? Because this question was brought up by somebody after our city council meeting. How is that done so an egg well is differentiated in its reporting from the other wells?
Okay. Well, when you make an application with the county, you're applying for basically a permit. And there are permits that are available for different, just as you described, and you described them very accurately, different permits that apply for different types of uses. So when you come in to apply for a well, they're going to ask you what type of well is it a domestic well for your personal use, 4 or less, or is it 5 or more wells with a mutual, or is it an ag well, or is it a municipal well, or an industrial well? So all of that information ends up going on your application for your permit, and then you're actually issued a permit for, once you've drilled the well, you're issued a permit for the well that you drilled based upon the application that you provided. So then that information then goes on to their registration at the county, and that's the information that we get back from the environmental health.
So those 71 wells that were identified as non-de minimis users, those were taken from the permits that were issued and accepted?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know that there aren't more than that?
Not for sure. Like with any, and this is the best way in order to describe it, like with any regulation or law, just because there's a regulation or law doesn't mean everybody's following it. And just because there's a requirement that you report your production or you report your drilling of a well, or even well drillers are required to report to the state if they're doing work like drilling a well, doesn't mean that everything is there. There's work. There certainly is, and we've had discussions amongst the authority staff. There's work that needs to be done, and there's work that's going to be done. We're in the planning stages working with Ron and his staff right now, with our staff, work that needs to be done going forward to try to make the well identification and the well production as absolutely complete as possible. We have some procedures that we're working on right now. I would say that we will find some things out there that aren't in the county files. The efforts that have been made so far, I mean, we've asked just about everybody that we know of, do you have any information that we don't have? Through the PAC, through the TAC a couple of times, through individual folks. We've talked to Water District, the county, all 3 counties. We've talked to everybody we can about getting the information they have to us. And I think we have a compilation of all that information together. Is it 100% complete? I would say my guess right now would be probably not. But it means that there's more work that needs to be done. And depending how we approach this additional work, it could be done relatively inexpensively, or it can be relatively expensive. If we have to go out, on foot and try to verify everything, somebody needs to do that. And as you know, the authority doesn't have a staff. If it can be done in a way that we compile all of that information that we believe may be out there, that may have a well that we don't know about, and we're able to communicate with them in a cooperative manner by sending them a notice, like we were trying to send a registration form to the de minimis well owner. If we can do it cooperatively and send them information and say, this is what we think we have, can you let us know what you do have? It can certainly be done a lot less expensively, but it just depends on how we all want to approach this. But ultimately, we're gonna have to go through that process. I think the exercise to demonstrate that the effort was made to try to get all well owners on the list.
We're still on 4. Okay, I got it.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
I'm sorry, what was your name again? The Gresham Savage yada yada?
Davis.
Yada, yada. No, it's Mike Davis.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for coming. A quick question. I get the intention, and this is like, hey, look at this. This is what we're looking at. Can we just kind of say that, hey, this is what we're looking at, instead of draft, because people don't love draft sometimes. But what's missing on here that you think would be better or reworded? I know what crop coefficients are, but I know most people don't unless you're a farmer, obviously. But what makes it, in your mind, what makes it confusing or not as valid as it could be?
It's not that it's confusing as much as that it's not complete.
It's not complete.
And there are a pretty good range. There is a pretty good range of recommended or proposed or sought after coefficients for the various crops. And I think asking for the information without having made a determination of the appropriate coefficient to be used for the purpose of this form
So the coefficient itself is a problem.
It's the problem.
Okay,
That is left undetermined. It's like asking a taxing authority asking for money before it decides how it's going to spend it.
Understand. So is the crop coefficient a big deal at this junction?
Well, it depends.
I know what it's for, but
we're trying to get to an end game here, and
right.
That is a good understanding, and to be fair, too. Honestly, we're trying to be fair. So the end game here is, if we don't have a better way to measure, is to try to estimate.
What's the crop?
And I think our goal would be to try and work with the homeowner, the well owner, to come up with something that is reasonable, in addition to be consistent with everybody.
Right.
And if there's difficulty getting there, then from my perspective, I'm an engineer. You know, I use information. From my perspective, if it doesn't work that way, then the better way is to try and to put a meter on it, or use some other method that's more analytical than it is an estimate. The estimate is, to me, is more or less the last result. And if there's questions either side, then we should work toward and try to get more funding. We've got grant people here, other ways to get more funding, maybe to put a meter on it and just take it all away.
To me, maybe the meter is the absolute best choice, but for now, if we just took away the crop coefficient, if that's the big, bug in the soup or whatever you want to call it, then who cares? I mean, what we really want to know is, does this reporting look good? What is your guesstimate on your usage if you don't have a meter?
Right.
And then once we have these people, this knowledge base, then we could ground truth those particular ones.
Sure.
And maybe come up with a better process. I think I agree with collecting the data, because then you can project, you can extrapolate from the crop coefficient. Yep. I need this much water with ET rate, etc. But for now, for this initial sending, I think the simpler the better.
Sure.
And it's totally up to you. I love data, and I can never get enough. But a lot of people don't like filling out stuff. I would make it, it's like you can fill it out in 5 minutes or less, like the new tax forms that we're supposed to be using. That's what I would prefer, if that's possible. And I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Okay with that.
Yeah. Simple.
Please.
Yes, my name is Doreen Conaway Baker from Sierra Shadows Ranch. I just had a question. If Are the wells on the base going to be registered? And I heard that they weren't. And I understand that they're exempt, and I'm not asking them to pay, but if you want data, then why wouldn't you have all wells registered, period? Why would they be exempt from registration? They weren't exempt from this process to be counted as wells in the valley. So why would they be exempt from a water usage? Not volume and paying, but what a usage is.
Are they going to
bottom
be
line is you
exempt?
want to know data.
Okay, I hope I'm not making a big mistake here, but we plan on having them included, yes.
Okay, I just
We
wanted
need to know that production too, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, yeah. Okay, any other?
Legal didn't come out as well.
Okay, if you want to go on to your next item, sir.
Sure, I will. This will go pretty quick. We'll get moving here. Next item is the TSS grant application status. Once again, this is a update report that we made at the TAC. I try not to report a whole lot on the TAC because Adam does a beautiful job of doing the TAC. Going forward, you might see a little different format. We've had discussions that maybe I ought to do more of the TAC report. Adam's still going to be here, though, to make sure it's correct. Do more of the TAC report and Adam do less because of some discussion about what the purpose of the TAC is and its direct relationship to the GSP. So going forward, it might be a little bit different, but most of the direct work out of the TAC, Adam's going to report on. Just some of the items that I think are important that we are working directly on. And this one is the TSS grant application. This is for technical support services through the state. There's a wide variety of services that are available to be applied for. First step for that was that we made an application called a general application to hold our place in line, sort of set our priority date. To make that general application, we also had to do a fair amount of research on all the other grant funding that this area has received. So they're making sure that they're applying their grants fairly, I guess. There wasn't a deadline for it, but there was a priority date set. We were able to get that general application completed, and it was submitted. I forget the date, but it was before the TAC meeting, because I reported the TAC meeting that was done. That has been submitted. Our priority date is held. It's been accepted by the state, so that application is in. Next step for everybody here, the board and all the stakeholders here, the next step is working through the TAC. We will be agendizing and identifying actual projects or actual services that we want to apply for in enough volume that we would create a specific application that we will then send a specific application for TSS support to the state. So that's where we are now. We're all caught up. We're up to speed. We're on record that a priority date is set, and we're ready to work with the TAC. The TAC is aware of this, to work with the TAC on any specific projects. So that's the report.
Okay, any other questions on that? Any questions?
No.
Okay.
Good job with the science problem.
Yeah. Once I start talking, it went away. I don't know.
Okay, and your next item.
Okay, last item. Jeff's going to do a little bit on this. I think, Jeff, right? You're up. It's on alternative imported water report. We put this on the agenda. We actually had discussion, so you know, again, transparent, right? So you know, we had discussions internally whether we should put this on here or not, and I felt real strongly that we should. And the reason I want to explain up front why the reason why I want it on here for the board is that you know we're hearing that we got a problem. You know we have a problem. We have an overdraft. We don't have enough water. We've heard and we know very clearly, we've done this before, that is water out, water in. Either we got to cut back production or we got to bring water in. So we know all of that. And we know that imported water, there's disagreement all over the place about imported water. Well, not all of it, but there's disagreement about imported water. Imported water is important, very, very important. Supplemental water is very, very important. Most of the basins I work in, they have a source of supplemental water. This one's going to be expensive, but we've got to flesh it out and determine whether we have a reasonable source and we can get it. So we know it's important. I wanted to get it on this board agenda and start talking about it in front of the board because it is so important. It is going to be, if it is something that we end up doing, it's going to be very expensive. It's going to have to be paid for some way, but it's going to be very expensive. I'm going to have to figure that out. But we've been doing quite a bit of work on imported water and alternative water. Jeff gave a report at the TAC on where we're at right now, on some of the avenues we're looking at. I thought it was important that the board hear it and the audience hear, just the general stakeholders hear this beyond just the TAC. And lastly, Well, I'll give you the last part after Jeff's done, because he may mention it. If not, I'll mention it, the last part, which is what we're doing going forward. So go ahead, Jeff.
We basically are focusing on two imported water concepts, and of course there's no imported water infrastructure here other than LA County Department of Water and Power's aqueduct that just carries water through the basin. We have been in contact with the Department of Water and Power. They're about to kick off a study themselves on looking at alternative water supplies for themselves and potentially getting into the water market and looking for banking opportunities. And they had indicated to us, their project manager on that study, that part of their scope of work was to look at potentially banking water in this valley. That opens up an opportunity to talk to them about, one, banking and seeing what benefit this basin would get out of it, but it also starts to create dialogue where we can talk about, is there a way to do a water transfer with them? That is, if we get them water in the water market and get it to them, can they actually deliver water here through their aqueduct that exists here? That would, at least from an infrastructure standpoint, that would probably be the cheapest way to get imported water here. So we were encouraged that there's an opportunity to have dialogue with the right people who are thinking about some of the same things. And we've started to conceptually lay out the infrastructure that would be needed to take water from the aqueduct and use it, and we'll be presenting that to the TAC at the next meeting, along with the conceptual cost of those components. The second alternative is to get water from the Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency. They have the closest existing infrastructure that moves state water project water to this basin. They have a pipeline that goes up to the California City area that they've indicated has extra capacity in it. And we've had a dialogue with them, and they're very open to talking about potentially using some of that capacity. Potentially, they've got 2 existing water banks within their area, and they're working on a third one. They're open to talking about banking opportunities in their basin if we need a place to park some water, and they potentially are interested in talking about water transfers also. We had laid out that would take a lot of pumping and a long pipeline to get the water here. We've conceptually laid those facilities out and done a very rough cost estimate that we presented at the last TAC meeting. We need to refine that a little bit. As I mentioned, we've talked to AVEC, Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency. We've talked to a very preliminary discussion with LA Department of Water and Power, and another critical player because the most robust water market is in water from the state water project. And you have to have a state water contractor involved to be able to bring water in here. And this area's state water contractor is the Kern County Water Agency. Right. We had a discussion with Kern County Water Agency. They're going to be very cooperative in working with us. They unfortunately don't have, surplus, what they call Table A water. It's all committed to their sub-agencies at this moment, but they seem very willing to be a participant and help with being a conduit with those other agencies that we would need to deal with. So that was very encouraging. And so the last remaining part is where to get the water. We've been talking to water marketers who put people together who have excess water and people who are looking for water. It was interesting to me. There hasn't been much activity in the water market in the last 14 to 18 months. And that's because there was sufficient rain in Northern California that the reservoirs were in pretty good shape, so people weren't out desperately looking for water. And they indicated that's really an opportunity. It's time like these that you want to be in the water market because not everybody is desperate in a drought, and you don't have a lot of competition driving up the cost.
Low demand.
So that was interesting information. And also, one of the things I had been thinking about is, we're looking at things conceptually. We've got to lay out a schedule. Once we, refine our options a little bit, it's going to take some time to get these things online. And there's a lot of other areas that are doing this SGMA process. There are a lot of other areas who are overdrafting their basin. There's going to be a lot of competition looking for imported water. and maybe one of the ways to get ahead of that competition is one way we are is, unfortunately, we're a critically overdrafted basin. We have to have our plan in place 2 years before the basins that aren't critically overdrafted, that are only medium and high priority. So, we're going to be ahead of them in that aspect. And in the water market, and I wasn't sure about this until we talked to the water marketers, there's the opportunity for options on water. We don't have to go out and spend millions of dollars paying for contracts for water. We could get the option to have the first right of refusal when they do have water available, which, until we have very firm plans and commitments and facilities, could tie up some water for this basin and do it fairly cost effectively. And then there might also be prudent to actually, and this is down the road, start banking some water in advance of when we deliver it, so that if there's a fluctuation in the water market, we've actually got water banked someplace to make up for that when we need it. So those were encouraging discussions, and projects are starting to take shape.
Thank you, Jeff. I just wanted two things to add, and then we certainly open up to questions people have, because I think this is going to become a continuing topic and a very interesting topic for people to start weighing in on. Two things to add. On the AVAC Fremont pipeline option, for you folks to know, it's a long way away. Nothing's going to be inexpensive, so it's not going to solve all of our problems. But the concept with the AVAC is that it's a treated water line. And when you think about a treated water line, one of the things that makes a lot of sense is that our hydrogeology, our geologic structure here, that we've worked with a lot of the folks at the TAC, is fairly complex. Getting water to replenish into our deep aquifer is not going to be simple. So a treated water line that comes into the basin and is able to connect with Don systems or the other mutual systems or wherever we can, to bring a treated water line in, and in lieu of pumping, take treated water and conserve the water we have in the basin, starts to make a lot of sense if the numbers work out and we can put the facilities in to do that. Because certainly if you're taking a surface supply, a treated water system, you've got to be able to store it to and be able to meet your demands and all that, or you can peak off of your groundwater or whatever. There's other ideas, but the treated water option is something that everybody should be aware of, that may be out there, that I think holds out some at least promise. And we will flesh our way through it. We will figure it out, and we'll bring it back to you, whatever we find. The second one is, and I'll be going through this with the board, with the chair especially. One of our thoughts is, this is what I said I was going to come back with later. One of our thoughts is we are talking to folks that we have worked with. This is not what we do. We're engineers. There are people out there in the industry that are water marketers. That's what they do. They're up in Sacramento. They're working, and they're putting people together. They're putting sellers and buyers and people together and making deals all the time. And certainly they make money on it. I mean, there's people that do that. And we can probably do that. We can probably make money at that. But that's not what we do. We know these people. We do work with these folks. And one of my thoughts is, and I'll be working with the board and the chair on this, is over the next couple of meetings, possibly working with a couple of these folks that are doing this for a living, that have actually documented and made deals, put buyers and sellers together, to have them come and make a presentation of the board to talk to the board about the steps that need to go through to get there, so that we can start talking about those procedures, just in a preliminary sense. Ultimately, there may be an opportunity where the board may decide, or we may recommend that we retain somebody to help us with that, but that's not now. We'll just hear from them and see what they could bring to the table, might be coming forward. So I wanted to let that out.
Okay, any comments?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. It's a good thing I'm here. It would be boring, right? Awesome. On the water district side, we've been looking at this for decades, since I've been on the board, really. And so we've talked to Kern County Water Agency, and we actually had lots of discussions with LA about water banking, and we were doing really good for a long time until their economy changed, and it was no longer necessary. But now that they're looking at it again, it's a good deal. So I'd be willing to make available all the cost studies that we've ever done, because that's why they're there, and the public paid for them. So we're more than happy to share that with you. The conveyance, I like the AVAC thing, and I like the fact that it's treated. The question is, isn't it mandatory that LADWP wheel the water if they have capacity? Isn't it mandatory they do that?
There is a state law on wheeling, and you are required to wheel water if you have capacity and you come to financial terms.
Right. It's about the cost, because
Yeah.
they can say, well, I'm taking your 200 TDS and blah, 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 and then I'm going to charge you double because of whatever. Same with water banking, right? So I think that this has a lot of promise. And I think the big thing about this is the cost. I think you boil this down again with new numbers and new conveyances, which you can calc those out pretty easy. One way you got to treat the water, one way you don't. There's other ways. Also, I'd like to reach out to the ag people. I know Rod was talking about some awesome deal he made. I won't tell you what he paid per acre foot, probably a secret, but it was pretty darn good. And so if Rod could do it, and I believe 100% on banking future, and the best way to do it is now. Because we have time to solve this problem. You got these nice costs. We can put those into our equation of solutions. Then we have time. We have something that's realistic. Personally, I see it kind of going in a linear fashion where we use the best of what we have. Then we do brackish, because that's kind of a no-brainer if the cost comes out the way it looks like, $400 an acre feet or something. Sure. And then in the meantime, we start with the infrastructure, and then maybe other people could pay for this infrastructure that would benefit them even more, because with business, it's all about return on investment. So a business that makes $100 million or $300 million, maybe they want to say, hey, I'll put $10 million into that, because then I can make another $200 million. I'm using these numbers. They're probably into scale with some of these operations. The point is I want to leverage everybody possible. Everybody. If it's a good return on investment, it's a good business move. It's an investment. But if it benefits everybody, cool. So I think that's the end game I'm looking at, is this final egg that we're making, car, I like car better. Once we have those costs, then we have a really awesome goal, and it's totally doable, and then all this negativity can go away, because this is a totally fixable problem. Yeah. And we have time. So we're not gonna all die tomorrow. Yep. We have lots of time. The key is we take all the action we can now as cost effectively. I'm anxious to see your numbers. I really want to see the numbers for conveyance. So if you could share those with me as soon as they're vetted, and then Don, we can give them whatever we have hanging around. It'd be great. It's not a secret, right? Okay, thank you.
On your comment, Peter, about water marketing and stuff, I see Josh back there, and Josh did pull me aside a long time ago and talk to me a little bit, and we have reached out to Josh and their group too. So cool. we're hitting everybody. We are.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, we're hitting everybody we can, trying to get the help that we need. So
Excellent. Excellent. That's called team.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any other public council comment? Okay, public.
Josh Nugent, Mobby Pistachios. I just wanted to say, really encouraged by this type of conversation. I think this is, moving along the right track. I think one of the benefits to importing water with this group is one of the things we've run into just moving water around as kind of a private, entity in the valley. There's a lot of red tape, and there should be, because you're moving water. And so having county and through the Navy, federal, and then I'm sure we could get state cooperation. I think that's one of the big benefits that you guys have, is that it really does benefit disadvantaged communities, agricultural communities, the city, as well as all these different branches of government. So again, I just appreciate this type of conversation and Stetson's work as well. So I think this is good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the comment on imported water. The county has not been idle with regard to imported water, but the things we're doing are on the immature side and preliminary, so I've been hesitant to bring it public. But there are things that have been happening, and I think now is the time to at least crack the egg and talk about Kern County's efforts for the past, I'd say maybe 6 or 8 months. And so let me give you a general outline. I can't give any specifics because I don't have any. But about 8 months ago, an entity called Willow Springs Water Bank came to Kern County and sat down in my office, and we had a conversation. And they were essentially in the Antelope Valley. They are a water bank, and they bank 500,000 acre feet of water, and that's what they do. They were looking to expand their water bank to 1 million acre feet. And in order to do that, they have to apply for various state fundings. In order to apply and fill out the application and compete well, they needed an entity to sign on the dotted line, and that entity has to have a lot of criteria or a lot of credentials, but one of them was a hazard mitigation plan. And so that's why they were in my office, to see if Kern County had any interest in supporting an application to get funding to expand their water banking facility. I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And so we brought the right people in the room, we sat down, we hashed it all out, and we agreed to sign for their expansion of water banking from 500,000 to 1 million acre feet of water. And my deal to them was, in exchange for that, I want 10,000 acre feet. You get they give me 10,000 acre feet, and I'll sign. About 2 or 3 months later, this was within the past year. 2 or 3 months later, they came back and they said, "Here's the plan, blah blah blah. We're going forward with it, and we're allotting you 30,000 acre feet." I said, "Thank you very much."
Wow.
So without any, I guess I'm a great negotiator. I don't know. I didn't say a damn thing. So the deal that we, Kern County, and this is not just me, this is the entire Board of Supervisors that's intimately involved in every facet of everything we do up here, is playing a role in this and understanding what that is. And all that is space right now. So the other leg on that stool is to find water to put in there. We are also making significant headway there, but that part of it remains to be private at the present time. But I bring that out to because we're talking about import water. We're getting closer to a GSP. We need to all be on the same page, and people need to know that these conversations are going on. They're premature. They're very preliminary, but they're promising. And I think that's it. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. Can I add on to that? No. Because there was something brought about the Kern County Water Agency. They are a group of class individuals, and we have very good ties with the Kern County Water Agency. Matter of fact, one of their directors is an A6 pilot, he and I have become very close friends, and we are working diligently together to find the satisfaction for what we're doing here, and they're fully committed. They're also former executive director, is one of the persons who's applied for this new job that we're possibly going to talk about down the road of how we're going to manage that, whether it's a general manager, whatever it is.
I see you looking at me.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what the conversation is. But so what I want to tell you is this: I heard people talking about LADWP. I heard people talking about Kern County Water Agency. I heard all about the State Water Project, and we all got to keep in mind that the key to our success in this whole field is relationships. It's not just about having a relationship between this board and the people who populate this community, which we need to improve and find ways to get better. But we also have to have that outreach outside of this basin, and we're all working on it. And if you have ideas, and if the PAC comes up with ideas for improving those relationships, I'm all for it. Thank you.
I have one question. Was he a pilot or an aviator?
He's a pilot.
A pilot, okay.
Okay, is there any other board comment? Any other public comment? Okay, then we will go to the next item. This is the second reading and adoption ordinance of 0218 establishing groundwater extraction fees and the rules, regulations, and procedures for their imposition. Staff?
Well, and let me say up front, just for some clarity, we're asking that, remember item 3D that we mentioned earlier. So we're looking for two motions here. One is essentially the item 3D motion, which is to waive reading the ordinance in full and adopt by title only. You do that first, then the second would be a motion on approving the second read of the ordinance.
Do you want a motion now for the waiving?
You don't have to do it now. You can wait till after the report. It's up to you.
Okay, fine.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. My name is Jim Worth. I'm part of the IWV GA staff. I also serve as legal counsel for the Indian Wells Valley Water District. I'm just here to make some introductory remarks prior to the discussion on the ordinance. And so I'd like to give just a brief overview, and I'll try to keep it brief, of why and how we got here as well as give a brief summary of what the groundwater extraction fee is proposed to look like. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act became effective on January 1st, 2015. And SGMA allows local agencies with water supply, water management, or land use responsibilities overlying a groundwater basin to form groundwater sustainability agencies for the purpose of developing and implementing a groundwater sustainability plan. The federal agencies are allowed to voluntarily participate if they so choose, and in the basin here, the Navy and the Bureau have both decided, and they both sit on the board as associate members. We are presently working on developing the GSA to achieve groundwater sustainability as required by SGMA. Each GSP is required to identify and implement actions that ensure each basin is operated within its sustainable yield. And sustainable yield means the maximum quantity of water that can be pumped from the basin without causing what are referred to as undesirable results. And in terms of the Indian Wells Valley Basin, the undesirable results that are most applicable would be a chronic lowering of groundwater levels, indicating a significant and unreasonable depletion of groundwater supply if continued. Significant and unreasonable reduction of groundwater storage, significant and unreasonable degradation of water quality, significant and unreasonable land subsidence that substantially interferes with surface land use. Now, in addition to complying with SGMA, a sustainable groundwater basin is going to benefit everybody by ensuring a long-term, safe, and reliable source of water. So with that, I should also note that failure to adopt a GSP by January 31st, 2020 may lead, or at least allows the state board to consider the basin as probationary. And if that occurs, the state board has the authority to come in and adopt an interim plan, and that would identification of actions necessary to correct a condition of long-term overdraft, restriction of groundwater extractions, and importantly, the allocation and administration of collection of fees. So we're talking about fees right now, but if we do not get this GSP up and running and adopted by January 31st, then the state board can come in and impose their own fees on us. And I believe they'd probably be higher than what is being proposed today. So on January 18th, the board directed staff to develop a fee proposal to finance the development and adoption of the GSP. The board directed that the fee be based on volumetric usage of groundwater and be imposed on groundwater extractions with the exception of de minimis users. We also have heard today that the Navy, federal agencies are exempt, so the Navy will not be subject to the fee, and it's my understanding that the Bureau does not have any wells within the Indian Wells Valley Basin. So staff has and continues to recommend that the board adopt a fee pursuant to Water Code Section 10730. 10730 is contained within the SGMA legislation, and it authorizes the board to impose such a fee. And I'll read what a portion of 10730 says. A groundwater sustainability agency may impose fees, including but not limited to permit fees and fees on groundwater extraction or other regulated activity to fund the cost of a groundwater sustainability program, including but not limited to preparation, adoption, and amendment of a groundwater sustainability plan, and investigations, inspections, compliance, assistance, enforcement, and program administration, including a prudent reserve. So that's the authority that we're recommending that the board go under. Prior to adopting a groundwater extraction fee, Water Code Section 10730 requires that the GSA hold at least one public meeting at which its notice is required to be published in the paper, and the data upon which the fee is based be made available to the public no later than 20 days prior to the public meeting. I believe you're aware that we had that public meeting on June 21st last month, and everything was complied with in terms of notice, publication, and making the data package available to the public. And that data package has been up for 45 days, and it still is available to anyone that wants to view it on the IWVGA.org website. Now, I will say, in addition to this one public meeting, I believe the board has gone above and beyond what's required by law. This has been discussed at virtually every Groundwater Authority board meeting since January. In addition, we held the board workshop on April 5th, at which time members of the public, members of the PAC, and TAC were all allowed to provide comments and interaction with the board. As a result of that board workshop, we continue to refine the fee and even the budget numbers, and finally getting to where we are today with the proposed groundwater extraction fee. In addition, we recently held a town hall informational meeting on July 10th, at which time there were probably well over 200 people, where we explained what the fee was and provided them with the opportunity to ask questions, and we responded to the best that we could. So, as we've talked about, de minimis users are going to be exempt from the fee. And according to Sigma, a de minimis extractor means a person who extracts for domestic purposes 2 acre-feet or less per year. Now, for purposes of the extraction fee, a de minimis extractor is somebody that could possibly share a well, 4 connections or less, and they do not use more than 2 acre-feet per year for domestic purposes. If you're using your water for non-domestic purposes, you will not be a de minimis user. For those persons that either receive water or share a well with more than 4 connections, they will be subject to the fee, and that well will have to be registered, as was discussed during the well registration discussion. Now, I'll briefly go over the budget and show you or explain how our gap funding needed of $930,000 was arrived at. The expenditures are as follows. The actual preparation and development of the GSP is estimated at $3 million. There's another $646,000 for programs that would benefit severely disadvantaged communities. We have the USGS recharge study of $87,600. There are additional costs above the $3 million to develop the GSP that will be incurred by Stetson, and these are costs primarily that aren't covered by the Prop 1 grant, and those total $435,250. I believe it's on the agenda for discussion later, but there's $161,500 that is included for administrative assistance with the GSP. I don't know if you're going to call it a general manager or administrative costs, but we've included that number as well. The city is requesting reimbursement for $210,000. And then we have legal costs, which are attributed to Mr. Markman, who has been retained as special water counsel. $100,000 of that is an estimated for the validation action. The additional $100,000 is for Mr. Markman's work reviewing and working with the water resource manager on legal issues that will come up when the GSP is being developed. So our total expenditures are $4,962,000. $4,962,954. Revenues. We have received a Prop 1 grant award in the amount of $2,146,000. 1.5 of that is for preparation of the GSP, and the remaining 646 is to fund the cost of these programs that are going to benefit the disadvantaged communities. We've received approximately just over $1 million from in-kind services from the Navy, primarily for well monitoring, as well as their work with the DRI model. There's an additional $60,000 that is attributable in-kind services from the city and the water district, and that was the cost to prepare the salt and nutrient management plan, I believe. We have $75,000 that we received from the 5 general members of the board with their $15,000 initial contribution. And then we have $500,000 that was advanced from the water district. And as we know, recently back in June, the water district, in order to try to keep the cost of the fee down, unanimously voted to delay reimbursement of that $5,000 and $500,000. I'm sorry. Thank you, Peter. $500,000 until after we adopt the GSP. And then the last thing is there was a Proposition 1 Distressed Counties grant in the amount of $250,000 that the County of Kern was able to receive, and that's been included as well. So we have total revenues of $4,032,000, which is about $930,000 less than the anticipated expenditures getting to adoption of the GSP. And so that is the amount that we are trying to raise through this groundwater extraction fee, about $930,000. Now, the board made a decision last month that the extraction fee would be $30 an acre foot. And we've estimated the pumping, annual pumping by those subject to the fee at about 21,600 acre feet. And that's an average monthly amount of $1,800. So if you take the $930,000 gap funding requirement divided by the average monthly pumping of $1,800 acre foot, and divided by 18 months, you come up with a $30 acre foot extraction fee. So we estimate that if adopted, that we would raise the money in approximately 18 months through a $30 groundwater extraction fee. Mr. Johnson's already talked about the registration forms, well registrations, but if adopted, forms would be sent out, and non-de minimis pumpers would be required to register their wells by August 20th. And in failure to register the well will lead to penalties, potentially not allowing the well owner to extract any groundwater. I'm sorry, just got lost there.
It's okay. You need some coffee?
No coffee. No coffee. I should note that, as Mr. Johnson noted, we have reviewed the records from the counties, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Kern, and we've identified as many non-de minimis well owners that we can, that we've been able to, and we continue to work to refine that list, and we will continue to look at and further refine it after the fee is adopted. So if the fee is adopted, it's proposed that the fee would take effect on September 1st of 2018. And the method that it would go out is the water resource manager would send out groundwater extraction reporting forms. It would be a self-reporting process where the well owner that's subject to the fee would go out and make meter readings on the first of the month. And then through these forms that are going to be sent out, they should be able to determine the amount of their fee, and then payment would be made to the Groundwater Authority by the 10th of the month, each month. If somebody was delinquent and did not pay within 30 days, they'd be considered delinquent and subject to a 1% penalty on the delinquent amount, as well as a one-time 10% penalty on any groundwater extraction delinquent amount. And that is pretty much a brief summary of the groundwater extraction fee that we've been talking about for some time. So at this time, if there's no questions, I'll turn it over to Keith to introduce the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're looking for two motions. The first motion is to waive reading in full and introduce and adopt by title only. The second motion would be a motion to adopt the ordinance on second reading.
I'll make that motion. To waive the first reading that was originally
No, waive reading in full and adopt by title
okay,
only.
yeah. We did this to the Water District because you don't want to read that document. Take forever. Yeah, okay. I'll make that motion. I'll make both motions to waive the full reading of the ordinance, and the second one is to adopt the ordinance. Correct?
I would like those motions to be separate, please.
Okay. I make the motion to waive the full reading.
I'll second.
Now, remember, we need public comment before you take action.
Right. Okay, I'm going to ask if there's any more other comment, and Bob, if you have some comments that you'd like to make before we go to the public.
No, I can listen to the public. Thank you.
Okay, all right, public comment, please. This is just on to waive the reading.
Okay, I just have one question. Sorry, my name is Zach Boardman. I have one question on what you just read. You said you were going to require the registration of non-de minimis wells. The whole time it's been, it won't be, but you just said that. That's a lot of people are going to have a problem with that.
De minimis extractors are not required to register the wells at this time pursuant to the ordinance that's being proposed. Non-de minimis, people non-de minimis,
I understand that.
will be required to register the wells.
Non-de minimis
Yes.
will be required.
Yes.
So everybody will have to register their well.
No. He's saying that everybody that uses over 2 acre feet will be required. Everybody that doesn't will not be. It gets kind of confusing when you say de minimis and non-de minimis.
I'm not.
De minimis users will not be required to register their well. All other well owners that are subject to extraction fee will be required to register.
I may be confused, but it was just read the other way around a second ago.
It appeared that way.
Well,
it appeared that way.
If we just use the word, I mean, we have to use the word de minimis and non-de minimis because that's the legal language. But
Yeah,
everybody
I understand that.
But everybody that uses over 2 acre feet a year, it has a well, has to register. We'll keep it real simple. Everybody who doesn't does not, and that's what we wanted to keep it simple. So basically, every private well owner that doesn't have an ag is exempt. I mean, I'm using general terms. There's always an exception somebody's going to find.
I understand all that.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
But the way that was read was that de minimis would have to register right now, and later,
No.
not.
That was, if he said that, that was incorrect. If you allow me to say that, Jim.
That's the way it came across.
Okay.
And also, I'm kind of curious on that because earlier, engineer was saying that they will need all that information.
In the future, yeah. In the future, someday, we would like to know exactly the total extraction of the valley. Someday.
How do you, for what information?
The total extraction of how much water is actually going out. That's all. But right now, the item at hand is this ordinance that we're wanting to adopt, hopefully, that says we need to assess people that are using more than 2 acre feet a year.
But this item we're discussing is only to waive the reading.
Yeah,
What we're talking about is...
I understand that.
We
but
can, yeah.
Okay.
What was
Because that will
just
be the
read
second
was
motion.
confusing.
Yeah,
The way it was read, I understand. I don't represent my employer. I do water. I play with 70,000 acre feet of water a year. That's what I do. But the way it's being read, it sounded like both of them were going to have to be registered. And the way that was read, or stated earlier, that eventually you're going to want a meter on every single person's well. And, well, that's what was just said. That was said earlier. Yes, at some point, we're going to need to know how much every single person is pumping. And for the little amount of water that the average person uses, it's going to be non-effective on any hydro report. And active wells give very poor hydro reports.
Okay, we aren't really discussing that right now. Right now is only to waive the reading. So is there any other comment from waiving the reading is the only thing we're talking about right now? Okay, then we have a motion and a second.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Director Kingsley, Director Gleason,
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown,
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
Okay, waiving the reading is the only thing that we approved right now.
That's
So
correct.
now the second item.
Oh, can I make another motion now? That we adopt?
May I make a suggestion
Oh, go
on
ahead.
this? I'd rather not make a motion or second until after I hear the public speak.
Okay.
I think I'd feel better after the public speak, give them a complete opportunity to change my mind, and then have the motion. Is that satisfactory?
Certainly. Okay.
Prerogative of the chair.
Right. I
That's-
didn't want to. I just wanted.
I just wanted to make sure we all understand we're going from the same point of view. Yes, we want to hear the public, and then we will make a motion and go from there. Okay, public comment on what Mr. Worth read, understanding that non-de minimis users are not required to register at this time, and they are not going to be charged. You may register if you choose to. I'm sorry, I said it wrong too now. Thank you. Those using less than 2 acre feet, please. Okay. Okay, public comment. Sir.
Michael Davis again for Meadowbrook. I'd like to begin by making it clear that Meadowbrook does not oppose paying a fair, reasonable, and legally compliant fee. But there are a number of issues that Meadowbrook has raised. We've raised those in writings and submitted comment letters. We'd like to incorporate those into this meeting's record. The most significant of the comments that we've made, I believe, is the fact that we perceive data gaps. There is information that this board hasn't had, primarily with respect to the same kind of thing we're talking about, some of the cost issues, some of the production issues, and therefore the revenue issues. And we made a Public Records Act request in order to get some of that information. We made that on June 21st. That information hasn't come in. We've looked at the presentations that this board has had in the past, and we maintain that there are data gaps, information that this board should have in order to come to the conclusions that it needs to determine whether the figure is correct, not whether the imposition of a fee is correct, because as I indicated, Meadowbrook supports a fair and reasonable and legally compliant fee. The ordinance itself also requires monthly reporting and the payment of fees. We submit that under Water Code 10725.8C, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency can require through its plan that the owner or operator of a groundwater extraction facility within the Groundwater Sustainability Agency file an annual report with the Groundwater Agency setting forth a total extraction in acre feet of groundwater from the facility during the previous water year. Not monthly, but annually. The ordinance also proposes the imposition of penalties and interest on a monthly basis, and we submit that that likewise is not consistent with 10725.8. The annual reporting the monthly reporting justification is that 10725.2A authorizes the agency to perform any act necessary or proper to carry out the purposes of SGMA. That doesn't authorize action that is expressly inconsistent with another expressly set forth provision in SGMA. SGMA says annual reporting. we understand an annual fee. The reason that that is important is that by imposing a penalty for the failure to register every month, which theoretically could happen, it creates the potential for a 100% penalty on an annual basis. I don't know if that was the intention, but if you look at the language of the ordinance, that is a possibility. Also, the way the ordinance is drafted in Section 4, the groundwater extraction facility may not extract any groundwater from the basin until it has received registration approval notice. Doesn't say until it has submitted the registration. And there is no time frame in the ordinance that requires the response, i.e. approval of the application. So theoretically, a person can submit an application, they can do the reporting, they have to sit and wait, not producing, while they're waiting for approval of that to come back, and they're penalized potentially up to in excess of 100% a year by simply producing to keep the crop in effect, even though they have submitted the reporting on a timely basis, which we don't believe SGMA provides for. So you need to do something that is going to require a very rapid response, i.e. approval, when the reporting is filed, or producers are going to be stuck in a position of having to make the decision whether they're going to violate and go ahead and produce and subject themselves to a potentially horrendous fee while they're waiting for a response to come in, or putting a provision in that mandates approval within a reasonable period of time.
Thank you.
Good.
Those people that have, that when you hear the buzzer, we're going to ask that you try to, we're not going to cut you off, but try to wind it up, and thank you for doing that. Peter, go ahead.
So I just want to summarize data gap, annual fee, annual reporting versus monthly, and then no date for approval. Does that cover it?
Yes, it does, Peter.
Thank you. I like to keep things real simple because everything complicates it. Thanks.
Keith, are you able to address
Yeah,
any of
why
those?
don't I talk about the legal issues? As far as the data gap concept goes, I think everybody acknowledges that we don't have perfect knowledge yet about all of the pumpers, and we're not entirely sure with any level of precision. Well, we've got just at best a guess as to how much is going to be produced, and that results in an estimate regarding the fee. But that's the case all the time when you're adopting fees. You don't really know how much money you're going to collect. You have to move forward on the best information you have. I've given you my opinion that this fee that's being collected is to be used only for the purposes that we've identified in the budget when we calculated the amount of the fee. And what that means is if it turns out we collected too much money for some reason, then the extra money would have to be returned. And I think everybody understands that. So that's the best we can do now on that topic, in my view. We need to start the process. As far as the discussion regarding 107.25.8, that section talks about, essentially provides tools to a GSA's toolbox about what they can do in order to make a determination about how much water is being used by certain parties. And it talks about, Section A says that we can require metering, essentially. Section B talks about the costs of that. And then Section C says, kind of in the alternative, you can ask that people submit an annual report. That's another thing you can do. It uses the word may require, and it doesn't say shall require. And so that isn't the exclusive reporting mechanism. That's just a possible reporting mechanism. That's why they use the term may. It also has Section D that says that an agency can use any other reasonable method to determine groundwater extraction. So, in other words, it's pretty clear that they're offering here some tools, but they're not the exclusive tools. And in my view, our monthly requirement is not contradicted by 107.25.8. I think that's it for the legal portion of the comments.
What about the date of approval? Is that something that we need to address? He said there was no requirement for like a speedy approval.
There's no requirement, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
He said about the approval of the application, that, like, are they waiting, if they're going to keep pumping and they're waiting for approval, but it doesn't come for a long time, then they're not in compliance and they could be assessed fees. I'm kind of summarizing, but I think that's what you got. Thank you.
So I guess maybe I missed, I don't understand.
They apply, they fill out a form, they send it in, and they don't hear from us.
So it's our fault?
Yes.
And then we're going to turn around and assess a
Well,
penalty
we're not going
based
to do
on
that,
something
but
we
I think
did?
there needs to be some assurance that we're not going to gig you because we're, slow.
Yeah. We aren't required to assess a penalty.
Okay.
And I would imagine that under those circumstances, there would be some squawking and
Yeah, I
we
would
would take
imagine it wouldn't
appropriate
be
action.
fair. Go ahead, Chair.
Yeah.
One thing, there is a
Please come up to
specific
the
word-
speaker.
There's a specific word being missed in this. It's the word due. The fees wouldn't be due if we haven't gone through the process of getting you set up to pay them. So they can't become due. If they're not due, you can't be charged a penalty. So that's the bottom line. And the ordinance that we've got is copying the statute. So
Thank you.
You walked all the way to say do.
I'd stay over there.
Yeah, just stay close. All right, Donna?
I provided a written document at the July 10th informational meeting with some questions and comments, and I asked for written responses. I did talk to Mr. Lemieux this morning, and he told me he has written them up. He sent them around for review, but I haven't received them officially yet. He did address some of the things in his remarks right now about legal things. But my main objection from the beginning, from the May 17th meeting when the ordinance was first presented to us, and I realize this is more a policy issue than a legal issue, but my objection was the listing of the penalties on the registration form and in the ordinance a number of times, where it states that you will be prohibited from groundwater extraction until you register or until you do your measuring report or for whatever reasons. And I really think that is draconian. And if you're seeking the cooperation and collaboration of the de minimis users, I requested in my written comments that it be removed. It be removed from all of those documents. I realize you probably need something there to compel people to reply when you get down to the real deadline dates, but I just don't think this is the right way to go. Also, in discussing that at the very first May 17th meeting, Mr. Hall did reply, according to the minutes, that users run the risk of having water shut off if they do not register their well by a certain date. Under SGMA, the IWV GSA does not have the authority to go out and shut off a de minimis user's well. It would become a civil case.
Can we address that, please? Who's going to do that?
Yeah, well, that was Mr. Hall's comments. I think I don't want to, and I wasn't at the meeting, so I think I'd better let you characterize your comments.
So, Mr. Hall again, County. The question was, at that stage, why would we have the penalties inside the ordinance? And they're inside the ordinance because that's where they have to be by law. We've got to establish what those are. We haven't done anything new with them. They are pretty much specifically what's set forth in Sigma. The only exception is that if you don't register, if you decide that you're going to thumb your nose at the whole system, we're going to do what Sigma would obviously have proposed, which is we will go after you with civil action to get you to stop pumping. That's the only thing we can do. We do not have the power to shut off a well like the water district does. Part of that discussion was me speaking about the water district. Don, I mean, you guys shut off after what, 75 days? Yeah, without payment. I think that's the whole process. If you guys follow the full process, I think it's 75 days. Well, you got 30 days, then there's 21. You shut off the water. There is a code section in law that says what the process is, and I believe it's 75 days. At some point in time, you're able to shut off a meter. We aren't able to do that. We will have to go through a civil action. So nobody here is going to be running out to shut off people's wells or doing anything because we don't have that authority or power like the water district does. So unfortunately, Sigma only allows us civil actions to enforce the fee or enforce turning somebody off and stopping somebody from pumping. This right now is a fee point. What do you? It's going to be the same problem if somebody wants to pump beyond their allocation 10 years from now. So,
I guess I would like to say it does sound draconian, but that is what the law is. Does that mean that we will choose to not do it at any point in time or choose to do it always? I guess the question is, and I kind of was looking forward to our response to Donna's question and our written response to that. If we don't have a measure to indicate how things are done, I think we're being remiss. We have to say this is what it is, and this is the response if you don't do it. And that is part of understanding the process. Does that make the process not draconian? It is, because that is what it is. And I've heard it said numerous times that we have to be fair and even in our response to all the issues. Is that a fair assessment of what you see, Mr. Hall?
I think that is a fair assessment. I would say, though, that just because the ordinance says you're going to impose a 10% penalty if somebody's late and they come in and say, you know, I've been in the hospital or something and therefore couldn't get my reporting in, that you would be able to waive it for them.
Okay. Donna, were those questions answered? Thank you. All right, next public comment.
Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Ranches. I just wanted to say that, we support a fee and that, we do want to pay our fair share. And one of the things we just hope going forward is, whether it's through a finance committee or the general manager position or whatever's developed, that one of the focuses be on keeping that fee as low and reasonable as possible. And, I hope a fine-tooth comb as we go forward, which I think, Mick, you've mentioned before, is something that we'll do. So I just appreciate that. And again, we don't have a problem paying a fee. We just hope it's, as reasonable and fair as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Other public comment?
This is short. Today is July 19th.
Amen.
Your letter is to take effect August 20th. You say the notices have not been mailed out yet. It takes at least 2 days to get mail, even if it's mailed from Ridgecrest to Ridgecrest. I think August 20th is too soon. I think you need to think about that and lengthen it. That's 4 weeks away.
Can we address that? Can we put back, should we, may we, without changing everything?
I'm not completely sure I understand the comment, but August 20th is when the ordinance would become effective, and then we would take action thereafter.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Wallace Martin. Today I'm here as a private citizen and not as an elected official. My address is on file, and I have cut all of my remarks exactly in half to respect your timeline here, Madam Chairman. But I would, if we go over a tad, I might appreciate it. I'd like to thank all the members of the board for all the terrific work that everybody's doing. It's a very arduous task to deliver and answer a state mandate, but it appears that everybody seems to be on schedule. So thanks to everybody who's working with this. Since time is limited, I'll jump right in. I have no objection, of course, I think like anyone, that proper planning is important. We need to do that. And to do anything, you have to have a deadline. So I'm in full agreement with all of that. So I'm working in the same direction. Also, I just want to make sure that I have some objections on how we're getting there and how we might improve to get there a little bit faster. So I'd like to jump into a couple of objections. To begin with, I'm voting no on assessing any fees at this time until we have a little bit more information to actually make an informed decision. I'd like to say that at the outset. So a general word to everybody in the public. Water rates, I'm very concerned about the cost both for the board, but as the cost here go higher, then the cost for the average taxpayer and the citizen and customer goes up. That's just kind of the way this thing works. Costs get passed on. So a part of my big motivation is making sure that we keep costs down all the way around. Water rates in Bakersfield, our county seat, and in many other cities around California have gone through the roof in recent years, as I'm sure many of you know. I have many friends in Bakersfield with average-sized lawns that are paying hundreds of dollars. Used to be 70, 80, 90. Now it's hundreds of dollars. And so for everybody, all of the citizens, whether you're on a well or with a residential city use, if you can't sustain your rates jumping pretty dramatically, like they are around the state, I suggest everyone get involved, participate. It's very, very important. I have a sincere concern about the cost all the way along. Concerning the GSA, we took bids to begin with, and the costs were originally touted, we're going to keep this thing at a minimum as much as possible. But as always with government, as we all know, bureaucracy gets in, and things start skyrocketing. And in the 20 areas around the state that are deemed to be in critical overdraft, quote, quote, many areas are reporting planning costs that are exceeding $2 million for their GSA in development. Our GSA is now exceeding $5 million, and I don't see any end in sight. I've been told that our plan is one of the most expensive of this date. Many are questioning exactly what exactly are, in fact, we paying for. What are we gaining for water? So anyway, it's very important. My next objection is this. I think that we need to get an exact formula for calculating these fees, and we need a transparent finance committee, which is very important, which we have not established right now. I think that we need to send out a letter to all citizens, just like we did in 2014 with the rezoning. Send it to everybody. And in that letter, we explain the whole plan, what we're doing, the state mandate, and in there we put a little survey that if you happen to be a well owner, that give us some basic data like we're talking about. Send it to everybody, and then explain the importance of why everybody has got to respond so we kind of know what we've got here. Forgive my objection, but to me this should have been done absolutely day one. We don't need to go door to door, Madam Chairman, but we could have just sent out a letter to everybody, just like we did in 2014. Lorelei's got the list. I think that we could do that now. And I'll be glad to even help with how that's kind of packaged. It needs to be nice and cooperative in explaining the mandate. I think you get a lot more public involvement. We have 1,800 wells, and to send something to 300 or 400 or 500, I just don't think it's representative enough, and I think you'd get a much better response if you send it to everybody and then got them involved. I'll make my closing remarks. I think that, because I have many other things, in 3 minutes you just can't cover them. I think as a general rules, and I'll sum up most of this, I think that the meetings need to be more cooperative. This meeting's been very calm, very nice, delightful. So thanks to everybody. Many of the other ones, of course, have not been. And I think that we need to take more of a cooperative, open, empathetic spirit with facilitators, professional facilitators, and not necessarily have attorneys running the whole meeting as the last public meeting seemed to have happened. I think that the last meeting was very nice that we had at Kerr McGee Center. The one in Indian was kind of a disaster. But here, I hope and pray, I'll sum up with this. I really hope and pray that the leaders of our local water effort will do everything in their power to keep our public utilities reasonable under absolutely any circumstances. I just want to ensure that this drought does not turn into crisis capitalism in any way or an excuse to take any more money from the taxpayer or the citizens than what's absolutely positively necessary. That's where I come from. So right now, I think that there's a lot of things that we still need more information to be able to assess these fees. Right now, I vote no to assess any further fees, not to delay the whole process. I'm not talking about a big delay, throw a big cog in. I would love to see a mailer going out to all the citizens immediately. Well, as soon as I said I'd be glad to help, but we need to explain it to everybody. So anyway, that is my opinion. Water is not a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. It is a basic human God-given right. And so that's where I come from. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Please.
Wallace, I love your speaking style. I just want to go to church or something every time you talk.
Well, I think we need to, actually.
Well, I do. Agree. A couple things. We know what the cost is. It's an absolute. So when you say we need to know what the cost is what it is today, and it's what's in our grant application. So we have that number, and that's the 900 and change. Sorry, I generalized, 940, whatever. So we know what that is. We also really have a good idea of the amount of extraction because we've been collecting that data for 25 years. So let's say we have, I want to use a rough term, 80 or 90% knowledge base on the ag use because a large ag and a lot of ag has been reporting for a very long time. So we use that data. I think the biggest unknown is the 71 co-ops and those guys. And so, like they said, you just don't know until you start. We've got to start someplace. I'm not in disagreement of mailing a card out to absolutely everybody to let them know what we're doing, but and that's fine. The thing is we already know the 71. We can already contact them. So we're talking about a finite group. Obviously, the larger pumpers are all in knowledge of this entirely. And if you're an ag user of any size and you don't know, it's going to be tough. But I'm not sure how much more because we do like ads and we do all these things. The postcards, yeah, so maybe some guy got 17, but maybe the rest came through. The point is we have consistent broadcasts of what we're doing. So with those 71 people that are going to get this mailed to them, 71 entities, that's pretty much the only, and it's the quantity that we're looking at, not who they are, but so we know who they are. It's the quantity that's the only thing that's in doubt there, and it's a small percentage of the units that we need to cover the $900,000 and change. And the last part is, I'm going to work on the other side of the equation. If I'm running broke as a company or me, you either make money or you spend less. I believe in always doing both sides of the equation, and so we're looking at that right now. What can we not do? What's not necessary? And as we come across those, as we discover those things, just like Chip here, who comes in too late in the game telling us that he does grants, as we discover those and we save money, that $900,000 number, it's going to drop down. It's going to ratchet down. So we're doing that. It's working. So just let you know. But thank you.
All right, thank you.
Doreen, I just want to remind you that Bob Page, who is on the phone, was going to be leaving at 1 o'clock. Is that correct, Bob?
1:30.
1:30. My apologies. Okay. Okay. Please, Doreen.
Thank you, Doreen Conaway Baker, Sierra Shadows Ranch. I just had a couple questions. I just wanted to say one thing. I am not opposed to the fees per se. I do believe that we are all in this and we all need to figure out the problems for the future. And that is going to be money, and that's fine. But fair and reasonable is always the game. And as far as when we say de minimis and non-de minimis users, you know, I believe that everybody needs to be a participant, and the sooner we get the word out to everybody, because right now we're saying de minimis users don't have to pay, and that's true. But you're excluding them in a process that we're almost to the end of 18, and in 2020, it's a new game. So instead of saying that, you know, let's get you involved in here now, let's get you registered, let's see how much water you use so that you have an opportunity to figure out whether you're de minimis or non-de minimis by 2020 when the plan is approved, and now all of a sudden every well has to have a meter on it. You're going to have to pay for that meter, and we will want to know if you are truly a de minimis or non-de minimis user. So instead of saying, oh, well, you don't have to worry about it now, well, you just have a few short months before you do have to worry about it. You know, that year and a half is going to go by fast. And so instead of playing it off that they don't have to worry about it, well, you know, let's get everybody in the game right now. Let's do it right. And, you know, have everybody register, have the knowledge of what's going out there. If you don't use 2 acre feet, you don't use 2 acre feet and you don't pay. Simple as that. But at least we're one step forward to knowing exactly what we use. And where I believe it's a little naive to say, we've all gone to a lot of water meetings over the last few years, but in reality, nobody has ever asked exactly how much water I use, and you have no idea what kind of system I have. You don't know how much money I've spent to have quality systems that are very water saving. So if you just go off of what somebody reported 10 years ago, what they used, well, and then put me in the same category, well, I'm not going to be in that same category because, you know, I have an updated system. And maybe they've updated their system too, but you don't know that. And so I think we've all conserved over the years, and I think that the water usage number that is out there may not be all as accurate as you think as far as what you're looking to get out of it. And so once again, somebody's going to come up short. And when it comes to self-monitoring, are you going to question what number I put down because it's not the same number as somebody else who, you know, grows the same crop? And so then do I have to turn around and, you know, how am I going to prove to you that as far as, you know, except showing you my meter, I guess. You know, so these are just questions that if we all had, you know, if we all had the same meter, if we were all on the same page, if we were all registered, then I think that we would all be starting out at the same step, and you guys would have a little bit better idea of what you need and what everybody is using. Thank you.
Doreen, the reports of your water usage from the Indian Wells Valley Cooperative Group that we all have attended for the last 20 years, and I know yours didn't start until later on, but those numbers were not reported by you?
What I reported in the beginning is not what I use now.
No, but it went from all these years until last year. Is that correct on the cooperative?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is good news. I mean, if you're efficient, that's awesome.
No, and I said you know, that's fine. I just want. I don't have a problem.
No,
I just think
it's
that,
awesome because it's good
you know,
for everybody, and it's also good for your cost of operations. So.
Absolutely. You know, that's fine. I know this fee isn't going to put me out of business. So I'm
thank
not,
God.
yes,
We've heard
I'm happy
otherwise,
for that.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, I feel like though at the same time, I don't want to have to turn around and have to justify my usage.
You don't, because you have a meter, so you got it covered 100%.
So.
And as far as self-reporting, we're just going to trust people until we can't. I don't know how else to say that. It's just a practical thing to do until later. But this particular item is just to get to the end of the plan, and then the plan will be very inclusive on how it's going to be more exacting. But this is kind of the best tool we have, if you want to use the toolbox analogy. So, but I would say that it's pretty close, because us as the water district, we're all metered. And so we're a big part of that equation, and then larger ag, everybody knows what they use. So we have a good chunk of that data that's pretty darn good. And then we do look at historic, and that's kind of a projection. So the good thing is it's a small component of the bigger cost, and so we're going to cover a good part of the nut. And if we don't, then at least we'll have some time to figure out another way. And if we can save on the cost side, which is kind of where I'm headed now, because we can't really do nothing else except for save on spending, then that's what I'm going to do. So if we can cut $500,000 out, or $400,000 or whatever, then that'll help a lot. So that's our goal.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Doreen.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, board comment. Mick is. Bob, do you want to go first?
No, I think we'll dip these. I did my last month.
Well, we don't know exactly what you said, but I think you said no. Yeah.
Did you say you were just fine, Bob?
I said I don't need to make additional comments this time.
Thank you. Okay, Mick, I see you were ready.
I'm leaning forward. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution and your thoughts. This is not a pleasant topic, but it is a challenge, and we need to meet it. Getting us to the point where we have GSP is a critical step. This is our first critical step in a series of many, and we need to move forward. We've been studying this basin for almost 40 years. We've got data. We're probably better studied basin. One of the better studied basins in all of Southern California. The errors are there pumps out there that have not been permitted? The answer to that is I bet there are, because it's human nature, and they're just out there, and they're people that work around the rules rather than with the rules. So I'm sure we will find pumps out there that are outside the numbers that we're counting. The question is, to me, is it going to have any impact? Any real valuable impact in the total numbers that we're trying to come up with? And I suggest no, it won't. So I believe there are wells out there that we're yet to find, but I don't think their meaning is going to be of any significance to the final tallies. If they are, then I look forward to incorporating those changes and making more meaningful numbers work if we have to down the road. We have it later in the agenda. We have an opportunity to discuss the gracious behavior of Kern County coming forward with an advance. If you watch the board meeting carefully, you would see readily that it is an authorization. It is not an advance. It's not an allocation. We are setting that money aside, and we are setting that money aside to advance to this body because we believe in this body. And because this body will have soon declared or created a revenue-generating source. Once that revenue-generating source is completed, which is the approval of this ordinance, we're going to move the money over. Until that time, that money is there waiting for this body to find some way of generating revenue before it's moved. I think this is a fair way to cover that gap funding. I'm looking forward to streamlining constantly and cutting our costs down. But I think that what's on the table before us is of value, it's necessary, and it's going to get us to GSP completion. And I'm going to make a motion to support staff's recommendation on the second reading of this ordinance.
Peter?
I don't really have any statements. I think we've talked about it a lot. So I guess I'll second your motion. I was waiting for Bob to do something up there in the cloud, but I don't know. Maybe we can't hear you. So I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have been directed by my board to vote in a particular manner. My council, not my board, my council, to vote no, and I will do as directed. However, I do have some concerns with my no vote, because what that does is, if this is not passed, that means the total cost will be divided by 3 entities, and that rather than all the people, we will say that the citizens of Ridgecrest will pay through the water district, they will pay through the city, and that it is not, I do not believe, fair in that respect, and that the water users do not pay. I think at some point in time we all will need to pay, and I don't want to see that those dollars relegated just simply to the water district users and the city of Ridgecrest users and the county to pay for all those. It seems an unfair, and at 2020 we all will have to pay if indeed this is approved, and if it isn't. And the state has already given us figures. We know that what it will be greater than any fee that's being even considered at this point in time if they come in and do it. But I will do as my board directed. So we have a motion and a second, ready for a vote. If nobody else has any comments. He said he had no comments. Bob, are you going to make any other comments?
No.
Okay. That was easy to understand.
Director
Okay.
Kingsley, Director Gleason,
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden,
No.
Vice Chair Brown,
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
Okay. The motion is approved. So we will go then to the next item. Approval of assessment advance agreement with the County of Kern, item number 6.
Madam Chair, members of the board, what I have before you is a agreement between the County of Kern and the Groundwater Authority for a loan to be made from the county to the Groundwater Authority in the amount of $500,000 in an effort to provide funding to the authority for our cash flow. I would also like to thank Mr. Gleason's efforts in getting this agreement to move forward. As you know, we do have a significant cash flow issue within the authority. I believe we currently owe Stetson about $380,000. We still have about $52,000 left in our credit with the water district. And as you well know, we're not going to be able to execute the Prop 1 grant until September. And the earliest we would see any refunding of our expenditures from the grant would probably be January or February. So obviously passing, the pumping fee is going to help. But as you know, that's not going to be an immediate effect in our cash flow. So having this $500,000 infusion of money at this point in time will allow us to get caught up with Stetson and get our books balanced in that regard.
Okay, is there comment?
Yay.
Is there public comment? Okay. Motion?
Yeah, before we make the motion, I just want to thank Kern County publicly. Kern County has put in, we have been the horse that has carried this load earlier on, and I'm glad to see other agencies more and more and more every day take responsibility for what we're doing. I think it's phenomenal. I want to thank my board of directors, my board of supervisors, and thank them for the $1.5 million that they have given in kind support that we're not getting any money back for. And I want to thank this board for having the courage to pass a very difficult ordinance. Thank you. And I'll make the motion to accept on staff's recommendation.
I'll make a motion to take your money.
Well, I'm seconding it there, whatever. I made the motion, so you seconded it.
Oh, I second your motion to take your money.
Okay. All in favor? No. Oh, wait a minute. Right, public comment. Did we get any public comment? Okay. All right, now we'll do.
Need to do a roll call.
I'm going to say that, yes.
Director Kingsley, Director Gleason,
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown,
Aye.
Director Page.
Yes.
Okay. The next item is review of protocol for TAC meetings.
Yeah, this is a lawyer item, and I'm presenting this in response to questions I received regarding, I guess you could say, the proper protocol for the TAC to take action at its meetings, or what does the TAC do in terms of sort of work product at its meetings, and how does it get to that point? And it's a fair question because unlike the other committee rules that we've got in the bylaws, the TAC committee is a very unusual animal. It's got it has a couple provisions in the TAC paragraph that kind of change the normal rules about how we do business at committees. And I just want to say for background, it's important to know that those were put in there on purpose because we, based on feedback we got back from the prospective members of the TAC, they wanted to make sure that the TAC committee operated in I guess you would say, kind of more like a symposium and less like a public meeting. So what we have is a rule that generally speaking, the water resources manager is supposed to bring each element of the GSP to the attention of the TAC at the TAC meeting so that the TAC can perform a thorough evaluation of the element. And then it says this: in the course of evaluating each draft technical element of the GSP, the TAC shall strive for consensus in preparing written recommendations to the water resources manager. The TAC shall submit its TAC proposals to the water resources manager as well as written summaries of the range of TAC comments reflecting the areas of disagreement for consideration in the final preparation of the GSP element. It goes on to say that if you're a member of the TAC and you disagree with something that's presented, you can also present your own sort of minority report. So what that tells us about the TAC is a couple things. One is, unlike a body that might be following Robert's Rules of Order, it doesn't sound like they're acting by voting with motions and seconds and so on, because it's talking about developing a consensus. And it also tells you that unlike those types of bodies, they're not preparing formal minutes, they're preparing written reports that will then be considered by the water resources manager. So the good news is, I think, for the TAC is that opens up a range of possibilities about how you conduct those meetings. It's not as rigid and formal as, I have a motion to consider this, I have a second, yada, yada. It sounds like the expectation is that the TAC members will come in and provide comments based on the elements that they receive, that they'll discuss those comments and see if they can develop a consensus on the comments and then reduce that to writing. That's the expectation. So our recommendation, I guess, of the TAC is, you're certainly free. Now, I guess there's a question of, well, how do we develop a consensus, Lemieux? How do we know it's a consensus? Do we poll the committee? Well, I suppose you would probably have to do that. But there's a lot of freedom for developing that consensus. If polling the group is the most efficient way to do it, then you can do that. If you want to take a formal vote, I suppose you could take a formal vote. Formal up and down vote, whatever works for them to do their work is what they're able to do. So it's very broad. I just want to add that there seems to be some confusion out there that because it's a Brown Act committee that requires that there be minutes, or because there's a Brown Act committee that requires there be voting, and those Brown Act doesn't require you to have any action items on your agenda. You can, in fact, the one I'm doing right now is not an action item. And so there's not going to be any vote on what I'm saying. And so the meeting can have no action items. And I think the way I read this, I guess under the Brown Act, I would say that they don't have action items as such. And therefore, there is no need for a vote. Obviously, the Brown Act, as you know, requires the meeting be open in public, and it requires agendas be developed. But that agenda is going to be pretty broad, presumably. It's going to be essentially a reference to whatever the GSP element that's being considered is, so that people understand that when they're walking in. And the Brown Act doesn't require that there be minutes either. There are some other rules that require minutes for certain other kinds of meetings, but that's not a Brown Act requirement. So that is my report, unless there's any questions, and I'll take questions from the TAC too if they've got any.
Yeah. We're gonna hear from the public. Yeah. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry. We're waiting for each other. My apology.
Michael Davis again for Meadowbrook. I think this is a perfect example of how communicating concerns and trying to work through them can be productive. We have submitted a letter. We submitted the June 20th letter at the last meeting. I've given the Clerk Duffy copies of those again, asked to be part of this record. But we really had some basic concerns about making sure that there was an agenda that indicated to people who were interested, not just the members of the TAC, exactly what the TAC was doing, and developing a mechanism to memorialize what happened that everybody who is part of the TAC felt comfortable with. How you go about doing that, as Mr. Lemieux just said, there may be multiple ways to do that. But we've had subsequent conversations with Keith, and the consequence was the last report of the TAC's last meeting was well received. It was much more complete. There was a better opportunity to review it, determine whether things needed to be added to make it a more complete report, afforded the members of the TAC an opportunity to determine whether there was, in fact, a consensus, and to have an opportunity, if they felt that it wasn't, to prepare a minority report in advance of the submission of that report to this board. So, kudos to Keith. As a result of those communications, this last report was much more productive, much more succinct, much better received, and we look forward to that being the practice that goes forward in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for a compliment.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
I'm Don Decker, a member of the TAC, and my comments here are coming from that member position. One of the problems with the more informal meeting procedures that we have had imposed on us is that the idea that somehow we're going to achieve consensus is a pretty nebulous concept. If you don't actually have a vote on something, are we just listening to mumblings that the members are offering, or what? So the comments that there was a number of the members of the TAC that wanted a more informal symposium-like meeting, I don't recall any discussion of that whatsoever at a meeting, nor do I know any members who actually were interested in such a thing. As a matter of fact, the TAC, independently of whether we should or should not be voting, offered a motion, seconded, and actually approved unanimously with the voting members to request certain procedural activity, including the ability to make motions and approve them. Now, we're wasting a lot of time here, not so much fighting over these procedures, But the committee is intended to provide precise, well-documented recommendations on technical matters. And when you have a more informal process going on, the very thing that we're supposed to be doing is neglected. It's unprofessional, actually. We're not just a Friday evening frat party. We're actually trying to accomplish some very serious matters, and if we aren't documenting that as part of the meeting record and actually having some means of communicating with each other other than hand waving or something, the record is imperfect. There's another area. There is a serious misconception about the function of the TAC. There has been a continuous comment that it would be desired, it would be important for the TAC to reach consensus on topic areas, technical areas that we are considering. The concepts behind the word consensus are coming out of the legal world and out of the political world. Science is not based on conjecture or subjective matters. It's not a consensus-based activity at all. Science is based on careful observations, measurements, analysis of that information, and then the documentation part of it is a critical step. You actually are recording what you're measuring or you're discovering. And the idea that we're not having written minutes and our only record is our reports to Stetson engineers it's incomplete. Everybody understand what I'm saying? There's a contradiction here between the objectives of that TAC and a more informal approach. You have a letter, all of you, that was written by two PAC members and myself as a TAC member that address a number of the issues that we see. The one thing that, I've heard it stated, but it's hollow to some degree. You have in the PAC and the TAC committees a group of individuals with, you'd have a hard time finding a group like those that have a greater level of skill and experience. And that needs to be taken advantage of. And a lot of the difficulties that are ahead need to recognize that, and that committee needs to be used more than just a place to claim you're reaching out to the public. There's more to it. There's far more to it.
Don, can you kind of conclude that?
I'm done.
Thank you. I do think this committee is very important. It's the most important committee, I think, because we recognize that and saw the minority and the majority report. And the fact that consensus is only a concept, but I want to see some action. I want to see some reports out of the committee to come back to this board to give them what you think, and that's why the majority and the minority report were included in there. You have a unique responsibility and a unique opportunity to address both from two different points of view this committee. I'd like to see those rather than worry about whether you raise your hand or develop a consensus. I want to see what you have to say to us. Please get started on that.
If I might, Peggy, I have a couple of comments I can respond to. Some of the some of the TAC members are regularly corresponding, sending Stetson engineers their reports. There are members of the committee, however, who seldom do or are providing very little. So we're not totally, and all of the members are not
I'm
totally
willing to
engaged.
disagree with that as the Technical Advisory Committee chairperson. If there are emails sent back to me, I do not send them out to other TAC members. I only send them in to Stetson. Just want you to be aware of that, so that if some people do respond to others, I have made this suggestion, just realize these are the individual comments on that technical side. They don't need to be run back and forth from other technical peoples within that group. So I just wanted to let you know, you may not be seeing other emails that come to me that I send on to Stetson.
Adam, you misunderstood what I said.
I'm not going to apologize
Well,
on how
let's go
I
ahead
understood. That was just my comment to you on that.
There was some time ago a process put in place where our individual reports that are sent to Stetson are supposed to be posted on the website under the committee meeting date. Some of them are being posted and some of them aren't. And so when I made my comment about not all members responding, I'm simply looking at that record.
This is something that needs to be worked out in the technical committee. I would ask you to do that and keep it. If you need our assistance or our help, we are here. But I think those things belong in the technical committee in consultation with Mr. Johnson.
Peggy, can I address something that was brought up by Mr. Decker earlier?
Sure.
And a lot of your comments are sort of policy comments. I'm only here to talk about legal matters, so let me limit it to that. The question I had was, are they legally required to vote? And the answer I'm giving you is no. Could the committee decide to take a vote on a given item as a way of crystallizing everybody's position? Sure, of course you could. You're just not required to do that. That's the first thing. The second point is, you mentioned the term develop consensus. I don't want to. I take your comments to be that it's sort of loosey-goosey and it's hard to pin down, and that it may not be the best way of a scientific group to develop a joint opinion. And you may be right, but I want you to know that that section and that language specifically was not actually developed by the GSA board. We accepted that language from, I think it was it Tim Parker? There was a draft prepared by Mr. Parker, and I think the GSA tried to be give as much deference to that draft in this particular paragraph as we could, because it was perceived that Mr. Parker had an idea for what this TAC should be doing, and he was the one who sort of had proposed it, and so we were trying to accommodate that. That's where that language came from. If it turns out that language is causing problems, then I guess the TAC can bring that back to us, and we'll consider that. This wasn't something that the GSA had come up with, this developing consensus concept. It actually came from the technical experts.
Okay, thank you.
Losing everybody.
Okay, let's go to the next item. Oh, I'm sorry, do you have more public comment?
Earl Wilson, and I'm a member of the TAC. I see improvement. Thank you, Adam. I read the latest report, and that is an improvement. My basic concern is liability by recommending things that aren't factual, and where that goes historically, and with review by the Department of Water Resources. With that,
Thank you.
Let you proceed with what's up next. Thank you.
Okay, so with that item being discussed, all right, the next item is discussion use of Kern County Public Health Building on Ridgecrest Boulevard as the IWV GA local office when new general manager is hired. Who has that?
I want to say something.
Please.
About the last item.
Oh, okay.
There was no vote, but I want to say something about the last item. Thank you, Madam Chair. It'll be real quick.
Okay.
I'm disappointed that the TAC is being bogged down by process. The TAC is probably going to be one of the most valuable organizations we have, and we need them being focused on technical solutions and technical merits and getting work done. They need to plow ground and not worry about process. I personally don't care whether the TAC votes or doesn't vote. You want to vote? Vote. You see the sky is blue and you get 4 guys that say blue and 3 that says green, fine. All I want to know is what the vote, who thought what, and I want to know the majority, and I want to know the minority opinion. I want to get their full technical perspective on an issue so that man can draw the best plan possible. So please, I encourage the TAC to whatever we need to do, whatever I need to do to support the TAC to stop getting bogged down on this voting issue or other technical issues, I'm all for. And that's all I want to say. It's just frustrating, and I want to see the TAC plowing ground.
Okay. Now, item 8, which we read. Who has that?
I have it. I could start off, and then if Mr. Gleason wants to add to it. As you know, that staff is recommending hiring a part-time general manager or whatever that position may be called in the future to manage the day-to-day activities or to assist the GSA in our efforts in putting together the plan. At some point in time or another, because this position or this GSA is going to be in existence for the next 20, 50, 100 years, they're going to need their own location. And Board Member Gleason brought to our attention that there might be the possibility of the availability of the Kern County Public Health Building located on Ridgecrest Boulevard that's currently vacant. And what staff is asking is that the board discuss whether or not we need to have a location for the future GSA staff, and if so, is this the location? Should it be another location? And then if this is the location, will they give direction to staff to work with Kern County in establishing some sort of lease or making an inquiry regarding it?
Can I follow that up?
Please.
Thank you. My swamp coolers are broken, so the swamp cooler guy just texted me. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Kern County is offering this for whatever we want to do. The current cost for the building, I got a report the other day. I forgot what it is, but it was utility costs and that kind of stuff. Amounted to probably up $5,000 or $6,000, I think, maybe a little more. The point behind doing this is twofold. One of the articles that some gentleman we all know here, comes here regularly, wrote an article in the newspaper, and he accused this board of being dysfunctional. And I read the article, and I thought there were a lot of truths in what he said. I think in many ways he was accurate, and we need to grow out of the stage we're in. And one of the stages we need to grow out of is we need to become more independent. We need to be an organization in and of ourselves so that we can make decisions and we can operate with consistency and we can operate outside the over-influence of any one particular individual on this board. One of the ways to do that is get our own building. The building is, I inspected it last week. It's a good-sized central building. It's a great place to have TAC meetings. It would be a great place to have PAC meetings. It would be a great place to have a Stetson office, so you can have a local office here. You can put your stuff in there. I think we got keys on it. I don't know. Maybe not. We can get those keys for you. It's a great thing to have. And we're asserting ourselves as an independent agency, which I think is vital to us becoming less dysfunctional. So I'm strongly recommending that we accept this agreement and take this building. Thanks.
What's the time frame on the building?
I'm ready to go.
In perpetuity?
Whatever you want to do. I don't know if perpetuity, let's say a 10-year lease with a renewal of 5, we can come up with terms.
Okay.
Yeah, there currently is no agreement being recommended at this time. Staff would be recommending direction or be asking for direction from the board to pursue this.
Is there direction?
Hey, Bob, you want to say something? You're too quiet up there.
No, I'm good.
You should do telemeetings more often. I like this part. Anyways, of course, yeah, it's a good deal. we got space and we can start creating an entity instead of the composite that we are. I don't think we're just, we're just guys acting in a responsible fashion, protecting what we do, and then contributing what we do to this group. So I don't agree to that word that we're full of baloney. But yeah, take the building. Let's start developing some kind of a separate entity appearance. Whatever works and whatever is most efficient. If you're giving it to us for utilities, heck yeah, put a little bedroom in there so the Steve Johnson could stay someplace inexpensive and doesn't have to charge us for those 5-star hotels. That'd be great.
Okay.
So is that a motion to draft up an agreement?
Need a motion? Sure, yes. If you need a motion, I move that we say yes to the building that Kern County is going to give us at cost, and whatever that is.
I'll second the meeting and look forward to the agreement being drafted for our next meeting.
Is there any other comment, any public comment?
I would like to thank Mick for offering the building. It's a nice-sized building, and it has one really bad flaw, and that's the parking situation. If others who spoke earlier objected to the parking situation for meetings at the Water District, I don't think that will come close to the parking situation that will develop at that little building. It has very few parking spaces, and I understand that the big lot that is east of the USO building is private property and cannot be parked on.
You do have a parking lot just a short distance down Warner Street at the senior center that can be used.
Yeah. Renee Westelusk. I have the questions about costs. You mentioned it's $5,000 to $6,000. Is that per year, per month? And then is this going to be put into the budget? Can we absorb this into the whole GSA budget easily?
Thank you, Renee. What I think I saw was $4,000 a year to air condition, $1,000 for water or something like that, and $10,000 for janitorial. But the janitorial was contracted out with someone down in Antelope Valley, and we paid his travel costs. We could obviously reduce those. So my goal is that the county would pass those costs on to this body also, whatever those costs are, and however we manage that building, and we budget it.
So you're saying it's like per year?
Per year, yes,
okay.
Per year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're directing staff to follow through.
Yes.
Okay. We haven't.
Motion in a second.
Wait.
Director Kingsley, Director Gleason.
Yes.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
Okay, next item. Report from the Technical Advisory Committee. Adam.
Not on this motion yet, but thank you, Madam Chairperson, Chairwoman. There was some discussion of some of the items I was going to present that Steve Johnson actually added in his, so I won't need to add those, but thank you, Steve. That went pretty quick. So first off, we did have our call to order. All our members were present except for KCWA. They were not present at that time. There was things that they had going on in their valley that she needed to attend. Public comments happened next. These were comments on the TAC procedures. Some members asked for written meeting minutes in addition to our recorded meeting information. We are going to have an additional discussion at our next TAC meeting on how we would like to move forward with these items as requested by you, Madam. Next, it was verified that the recording of our last TAC meeting was posted. Now our WRM, when I mention names from the different people as part of our WRM, I'm just going to say your names. Mr. Johnson then requested that item 7A be moved up so that he could discuss that at the time. He briefly reviewed our TAC guidance memo prepared by our legal counsel, indicating strict reading of the memo was a bit restrictive, only 2 agenda items, and reported the July TAC agenda was prepared with the intention to comply with this memo, specifically the direct reference to sections of the GSP. Also pointed out the memo was on the June GA board agenda, but time ran out, but we will be addressing that now in the future. This will be part of our a discussion, now will be part of our next meeting in August. TAC members and the public had significant discussion in general disagreement with these TAC guidelines. The chair and the WRM, myself and Steve, we requested to inform the board regarding this matter, and we have done that. Next was the ad hoc modeling workshop report. DRI was on the phone, and Mr. Teasdale presented a series of slides on the workshop, and he, along with the participating members, highly agreed at how productive the ad hoc format was. Enjoyed it. It was a wonderful time frame, lots of time. Technical side, they slammed that with a lot of things that needed to be discussed. Slides are available on the website. Following this was a discussion on the USGS recharge study. A clarification of the USGS recharge results with deep percolation was requested, approved, and lastly, the completion of the USGS work was then requested. This recharge bookends are approaching 4,100 and 7,700 acre feet per year. So a top and a bottom to give us more information on what would then happen to our hydrogeological information that we need for our models. The WRM report that Jean Moran was preparing a potential list of topics for ad hoc assignments. So these will be future ad hoc meetings. Members will be assigned based on experience and on the topic. An ad hoc membership discussion concluded 5 TAC members could participate. This is what the desire was. The chair and WRM reported on understanding from legal counsel the ad hoc should be limited to 3 of the 11 TAC members. The TAC still would like to see 5 TAC members on that, and we can discuss that in the future. If that can be applied or not, then we will stick with only 3. Sustainable management criteria. Mr. Helsley presented slides on the criteria. They are also available on the website. Discussion followed up on the follow-up, and it will be tied to the modeling work. Recyclable water, this came next. Mr. Helsley presented slides on the opportunities and constraints for recyclable water. This is also available on the website. General discussion was then occurring, limited new water supply with very high costs. A tech memo will be released for the TAC to review by the 20th, tomorrow. And we have a 3-week review that will be due then by the 10th. The TAC expressed a need to get working on this GSP. We suggested the WRM provide an outline of the GSP and then start providing sections of the GSP for the TAC review. This was discussed at that time, and you're very much aware of that now. The DRM agreed and will be providing tech memos soon that will be turned into sections on the GSP. Alternative and imported water conservation. Mr. Helsley then presented slides on imported water and conservation that are now available on the website. Detail on potential new supplies and potential banking. This was already discussed today. I'm just referring that we did discuss that as well. Current water conservation was reviewed along with the opportunities. This, of course, will be part of the tech memo for the GSP. Our future agenda items, TAC reviewed and added the review schedule for GSP sections, distribution, DMS, and GSP outline. Future TAC dates through October were confirmed, including our August modeling calibration ad hoc meeting. Let's see. The previous portion for item 7B, the Prop 1 update, that was already completed and done, and we adjourned our meeting at 4:15.
Is there any discussion or questions?
It was very thorough.
Thank you. I was hoping it wasn't too much thorough.
It was perfect.
So we're not using too much of the important time.
Yeah, balanced ingredients.
Excellent. Actually, I do have a question. Do we need to have signatures on this that we report in? I just want to make sure that it is done correctly, because I see other people doing wonderful signatures. I just want to make sure, do I need to sign it as chairperson?
This is the written report that you're giving?
This is just the written report that's given in, but it
Yeah,
does
you don't
go
have to have
into-
signatures, you don't have to have a written report. In fact, you don't have to have a report.
Very well.
They do.
Thank you very
Yes.
much. I'm still going to type something out with help.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, is there any comments from the public? All right, then let's go to the PAC.
Before I start my official report for this time, I did raise some questions at this morning's meeting. It is a set meeting. It's been going on for a while. There's no agenda, no posting, no notification of the meeting. And I attended the city council meeting last night, and there was some concern about attendance of 2 of the board members at this ongoing meeting. So I brought those up, and they were addressed by Mr. Lemieux. Keith, would you like to report what the decision was?
There was a meeting, so there's a distinction in the Brown Act between ad hoc and standing committee meetings. So any meeting that involves any number, well, I guess less than a quorum of the board that meets on a regular basis with a kind of a fixed agenda will be a Brown Act meeting because it becomes a standing committee meeting. In contrast to that, there's ad hoc committee meetings, which are meetings that are sort of set up on the fly and don't have a standing agenda, usually are for single issue, that kind of thing. So of course you've got this kind of gray area of if you have more than one ad hoc committee, at what point does it become a standing committee? So we had a meeting that started informally that included the chairs of the 2 committees and some staff. And over time, some of the board members over time began to attend those. And it was never formalized in any way, shape, or form, but they were attending, and so it was thought to be ad hoc. But it's been going on for a while now, and at some point you got to look at it and say, well, maybe this is a standing committee. So I was asked that question this morning, and it looked to me like we had crossed the line into a standing committee. At that point, we had regular attendance by 2 board members. There was no action taken, but it was on, generally speaking, the agenda of the committees is what was being discussed. So my recommendation is that practice cease immediately. As a result of that, the two board members that were present left the room graciously.
Thank you.
They were, at least one of them was happy to do that.
I was very happy, yes.
And so if those events will not continue in that form, if we have regular meetings with the committee chairs, it will be staff only, so that can't be construed as a standing committee of the board going forward. And that was my recommendation. We took action immediately.
Real quick, thank you very much. A real comment. That started with me, and the reason it started with me is because when I was the chair, I wanted to have a meeting with the TAC, the PAC, and vital staff, water resource manager and general manager. And so every time we have a 10 o'clock meeting at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, we'd all get together, sit down, we'd go through the agenda, the express purpose of making it look like efficiency, trying to create an efficient meeting to get in and out of issues quickly. I did that for a year. About November, I invited Peggy, who was going to be the follow-on chair. I said, Peggy, why don't you come on and watch what I do? You might like doing it, and you might take this on and do it. Peggy said, sure. Peggy started coming to me. She went to 2 of the meetings. Come January, I was still on the list, so I was invited to the meeting, and I went to the meeting. And I think February, I went to the meeting. So January, February, although I wasn't the chair, I continued to go to the meeting. I just did. It was brought to my attention by a good friend, and I said, you know what's going on? How come we're not going to that meeting? Why are you? It was a really good question. And I said, no, I shouldn't be going to that meeting. I have no purpose of being there. So the purpose of me telling you is I started the problem. I thought we fixed it, but I guess it didn't. And I highly recommend, it really worked good for the chair to have that, to be at that meeting, that pre-meeting, because it irons out a lot of details and makes meetings go quickly. So instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I think we should be careful how we do that, and I would recommend to the chair that she continue to have that meeting and be present at that meeting, but only her. Thank you.
I think we decided that it would just be staff, and that because the purpose was with PAC and TAC to talk to them. So now we'll just do it with staff and as needed. And so there will be no more meetings.
Yeah, and we
like
have to
that.
be sensitive to the fact that this kind of meeting before the meeting thing is exactly why they adopted the Brown Act. It's exactly the kind of thing they were concerned
We
about
hadn't
when they
even
created the Brown
considered
Act.
that as being bad.
So let's keep it to staff. We can make sure that vital information gets to the board, to the chair before the meeting starts if something comes up.
Okay. So go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, thank you to all those who addressed those concerns. And I wish that the council member were here to hear that we did address some of the issues she mentioned last night at the city council meeting. Now my report. I have 2 reports in the agenda packet. The first report was
Donna,
from...
let me just say, Bob, are you getting ready to leave?
Yeah, I will have to leave.
All right. Thank you for your attendance. We know that Bob is leaving at 1:30, and we thank you. So, Donna, if you will continue. Thank you.
Yeah, I had 2 reports in the packet. I'm not going to go over the June 21st. We did not have an opportunity to present that, and that did include the PAC recommendations regarding the groundwater extraction fee process. And I hope that they had an impact on the decisions that were made. And we gave you our best input. The following actions and discussions took place at the July 12th PAC meeting. This meeting was approved as an alternate meeting for the July 5th PAC meeting. Agenda item number 1, roll call established that a quorum of 7 voting PAC members were present. A question was raised as to whether Steve Johnson or any member of the Stetson team was in attendance. And a request by the group that some knowledgeable member representing the WRM team attend each PAC meeting. Could possibly be done by Skype or teleconference call. Agenda item 2, the approval of the May 31st minutes with 1 correction, and discussion of accusation of a potential Brown Act violation in the way that we prepared our PAC recommendations. But I think we discussed that thoroughly in public, and we discussed it again this morning. Agenda number 3, no public comments. Agenda item 4, lengthy discussion regarding recommendations from PAC members regarding how to implement full well registration. A list of discussion items will be included in my report here, but these items were not limited to the following. I did not have complete access to the minutes yet to get the full list, so I was just going from my notes of what was discussed. A need to discover what is holding up more complete data being provided by Kern County and Kern County Department of Environmental Health regarding numbers of wells. A call for a notification by mailings by APN numbers, and perhaps putting some questions on the mailers. Do you have a well? How can you respond? Where can you get the information? That sort of thing. Emphasize the benefits and the need for the well information. Focus on the fact that domestic well owners will be the first to suffer, and we all share a common aquifer. Prepare some fact sheets for the public. Make use of the C&E plan. Perhaps funding purchase of meters at cost or with a group buy, and cover installation costs as well for domestic well owners. Provide a grace period for registration and delay enforcement options. Also several commented that of the need to simplify the well registration form. Inquire whether Kern County Water Agency can get the well data and help prepare the maps that are required for Task 12C in the GSP development, which calls for a map of all well locations and a map showing the density of wells per square mile. So we do need this information for our GSP plan. Agenda item 5, discussion of speaker team outreach plan. So this was on the previous agenda. We said please refer to our May 31st minutes and also to the C&E plan, which has a list with asterisks beside the organizations and groups that we felt needed to be involved in the outreach. Agenda item 6, the POAM review for PAC input to provide comments to the WRM. So I went through the grant application, each attachment, and provided an outline from Proposition 1 showing the proposal for the chapters, the tasks, and the subtasks that are to be accomplished for the development of the plan. Rather than taking time to tie that to the POAM numbers exactly, we set up an ad hoc committee to identify the tasks and link them to the POAM items that should be reviewed by the PAC. The ad hoc committee will report at our August 2nd meeting. Agenda item 7, alternative funding sources and additional grants. We have discussed this in the past too. An ad hoc committee will review some options for funding, ideas for additional grants, and the ad hoc committee will report at the August 2nd PAC meeting. Agenda item 8, future agenda items. Discussion of an email sent to the PAC chair by Steve Johnson with a list of suggested items for the August 2nd and September 6th agendas. So we'll be moving into his recommendations for those meetings. Agenda item 9, there were no committee member announcements or comments. However, representatives of the domestic well owners presented a comment letter that was addressed to members of the GA, the TAC, and the PAC, referencing the GA memo dated June 4th from Keith Lemieux to Peggy Breeden. And that item is attached. My list for item 6 and the comment letter from the well owners are attached to my report. The PAC meeting was adjourned at approximately 8:25 to our next meeting, August the 2nd, at the IWV conference room at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Donna. Is there any questions or comments of her report? Josh?
I just wanted to say real quick that Josh and Agent Mojave Pistachios really appreciates some advance notice on the August and September topics, and that getting that a little bit in advance is super, super helpful and helps us kind of plan to be able to participate a little more. So appreciate that.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, 2 in a day, I know.
And I'd like to thank Josh for sitting in for Ed Imsand, who was not able to attend the meeting. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, then we will go on to the next item, which is the General Manager's report.
Madam Chairman, I only have one item. We'd received a email from Bob Page before I believe right after he signed off. And what he's recommending that staff do in the future is that when we provide an agenda item in front of the board, that we should include the fiscal impact information. I think this came about regarding the lease. So I don't think that's an unreasonable request, and I think we can do that moving forward. Because what he's looking for is if there's going to be a cost to it, is it budgeted? Do we have to reduce our budget someplace else to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it type stuff. So I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
It seems like that could be easily included as part of our staff report template.
Marvelous. Good. Good idea. Okay, closing comments. Board members or staff to identify items for future board business? Anybody?
Well, yeah, I'm good.
I'd like to ask a couple items on a future agenda. I would like to talk about staff's attendance at the PAC meetings and how we can accomplish that. They are thinking that we attend the TAC meetings and why not the PAC meetings, and I'd like to be able to discuss the fiscal impact of that and how it's accomplished. I would also like an item on the next agenda, the discussion of brackish water and how that relates to future water supplies, and have some discussion with us about what it is and how it could be accomplished. And I would also like to look at a further explanation of the city and the water district's saltwater nutrient plan, how it relates to water in the future. So it can be all one item together and go from there.
Madam Chair, when you're referring to staff's attendance at the PAC, are you referring to the water resource manager?
Whomever.
And what the cost of that will be? Okay.
Whomever. Yeah.
$500 an hour is $30.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Well worth it.
Any other? Yeah. Right. Any other items for that? Okay, then we'll go into closed session, and I thank you all for attending.
Yay.
Thank you.